£12.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish chips, peas, sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10p, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60p. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Lots to discuss this morning, including the prison chief linked to organised crime. This is the front page story in the Sunday Times. HMP Wandsworth is meant to be one of the most secure prisons in the country. Instead, there are very strong allegations that a prison chief has been having organised criminals, gang chiefs in his house, and indeed has left under a bit of a cloud. But with taxpayer-funded compensation, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Trump backing Putin's attempted land grab in Ukraine. Zelensky's going to be in Washington tomorrow. Full coverage, of course, on Talk. Also, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, accuses Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, of fueling a revenge porn culture. The Online Safety Act debacle is continuing. And Lord Kinnock, the former leader of the Labour Party, calling for the two-child benefit cap to be scrapped. He says that is a good idea. We'll talk about knife-wielding children, 25 children in reception, turning up with knives, turning up with weapons. Yes, really. We'll also talk as well about chants of shame on you yelled by pro-Palestinian supporters during a demonstration at RAF High Wycombe. When will they leave the RAF alone? We'll talk to Jonathan Sacerdoti about that a little bit later on. As always, I want your thoughts on all of this, how this apparent massive security breach at HMP Wandsworth managed to happen. Let us know your thoughts on all of this, including how we reform the prison system, how we keep it safe. We'll talk to a former governor in just a second. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note 0344 499 1000 to do that. Keep them to less than a minute, please, if you would. Otherwise, Tech Up Dave becomes Techie Up Dave. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on the same number, or give me a ring on that main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Now then, huge story on the front page of the Sunday Times this morning. Really, really interesting story. Revealed the prison chief who had links to gangsters and then left with a payout. This is a big investigation. Sunday Times investigation poses serious questions about the integrity of the prison system. Bobby Cunningham, he was Deputy Governor of His Majesty's Prisons Wandsworth when he met an alleged cocaine trafficker at his house. They discussed a prisoner under his supervision. Cunningham was the subject of internal whistleblowing reports after transferring serious criminals to open prisons. He sent a fraudster to open conditions, even though the Financial Conduct Authority warned he could tamper with overseas assets. He was having an affair with the manager of HMP Wandsworth Intelligence Hub, responsible for handling reports of crime while facing questions over his conduct. The chief operating officer of the prison service, the Sunday Times reports, who knew his father, a former prison officer, challenged a move to suspend him. He was allowed to resign on medical grounds before being dismissed and received compensation funded by the taxpayer of £160,000. Government lawyers demanded the cash back after an investigation found him guilty of misconduct. An inquiry into the prisoner transfers was deprived of key information and never completed, and the Ministry of Justice did not refer Cunningham for potential crimes, including misconduct in public office. The MOJ, Ministry of Justice, sources have told the investigations that they did not reveal evidence of criminality. Well, Vanessa Freck is a former prison governor. She's also a Reform UK Justice advisor. Vanessa, good to speak to you this morning. What do you make of this very serious allegations in the Sunday Times, big investigation by them and by David Shipley, who is a former prisoner himself, now turned justice campaigner?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is just yet another worrying issue within our prisons. We know about corruption in prisons. We know the amount of drugs that are coming in, the amount of inappropriate relationships. And what we don't know, and the MOJ is not transparent about, is how far up it goes. And I think that, you know, corruption at a higher level can completely destabilise a prison. It sounds to me, it smacks of, you know, well, let's just brush this one under the carpet. And I think that's pretty much what they did. You know, I've seen corrupt governors over the past, and you know, those that are much higher up don't want a big fuss. If you Google, which I did this morning, how many governors have been convicted of malfeasance in a public office, say, over the last 5 years, you can't get the figures because the Ministry of Justice don't keep those specific figures. So, you know, it's not transparent. It doesn't instill public confidence whatsoever.
In terms of the corruption that you saw when you were working in the prison system, when you were, I think, head of security at Wormwood Scrubs as well, and you worked, I know, in a number of different prisons as well. How did the rank and file deal with it? How did they actually, did they report it? Did they turn away from it? Did they try to do something about it but were rebuffed? I mean, what's the kind of culture when people do sort of call these things out or attempt to, in obviously a very hierarchical system?
Look, I mean, most prison officers are hard-working, honest people. There are those that are not. And those that are not will not have your back. And most prison officers will report it. Most prisoners, interestingly enough, will report it because prisoners can't keep their mouths shut. You know, it's all about gathering intelligence and acting upon that intelligence. Why this guy wasn't suspended in the first place, I have no idea. You know, just because he was the deputy governor means nothing, you know, and it appears to me that corruption runs from the bottom right the way up to the top. And if you're not going to take action, then what does that say to those staff who want to report something but are too frightened to?
Why is there this culture of cover-up? Why is there this culture, do you think, of just, you know, pay him off, let him medically retire, which appears to have been the case in this case? He did not respond to requests for comment from the Sunday Times at all in any of this.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, of course, they are very serious allegations, and of course, there is clearly something in this. I mean, Gabriel Pogred is the lead reporter on it and one of the most accomplished and decorated investigative journalists in the country. I just wonder why this culture exists, not just in the prisons itself, but in the Ministry of Justice too. We've got to be able to trust our institutions, and this is going to do nothing to help trust in the prison system.
Well, look, I think that is all of our public sectors. You know, the National Health Service, the prison, the police, all of it. They don't want to appear that they can't manage. And I think the fact that, you know, he was allowed to medically retire and then subsequently they did a disciplinary hearing and found him guilty of misconduct in a public office and ask for the money back says it all, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, that should never have been the case. He should have been suspended straight away.
How
No ifs or buts.
How widespread, I mean, perhaps not on this scale of these allegations, but how widespread do you think corruption in prisons is?
Well, that's the thing. We have no figures. I've tried to get figures this morning, and I can't get anything past about 2019. So there is no transparency. And that in itself, by not saying, look, you know, we've had X amount of prison officers, we've had X amount of nurses, we've had X amount of governors, you know, by not being that transparent, well, that just fuels the public outcry of how poor our prison service is at the moment.
So what needs to be done, Vanessa? You, of course, have been a very outspoken former prison governor yourself, former head of security at Wormwood Scrubs. You're also someone who's now advising Reform UK on justice. What are you advising them? How would you tackle this problem?
Well, first of all, I'd have a real hard look at the MOJ and the civil servants that run the MOJ. And I think that transparency and honesty by them has to be the key. And, you know, honesty and trustworthiness has to come from the top right the way down. And that's what leadership is about. I'd like to see the sentences meted out to corrupt staff much more severe. I don't believe that many of the sentences are, you know, when you've had illicit affairs or you've been caught bringing drugs in and you're getting 2 years. I don't see that is any kind of deterrent at all to others to not follow. And I think that the vetting is the key here. You know, when he took over as head of security, he should have received an enhanced security check, which I did when I took over of head of security at Wormwood Scrubs. You know, which goes into your associates, your family, etc., etc. The fact that he had 2 dealings with the police that he didn't mention to anybody or report, you know, says straight away about his reliability and his trustworthiness.
Vanessa, there's a controversy, of course, in regard to what you've been advising Reform on, and I just want to read out a message here from someone who has messaged in regard to this, and this is Sally. Oh no, sorry, it's not Sally. Let me just find this here, actually. Apologies. Yes, this is Kate in Warwickshire, who says, does Vanessa Freck still think men can magically change sex or be entitled to women's things? If she believes that, I don't trust a single word that comes out of her mouth, says Kate in Warwickshire. What do you make of that? What would you say to Kate in Warwickshire, Vanessa?
Look, I haven't advised Reform on anything. I was asked a question and I answered that question. No, I don't magically believe that anybody can change sex. No, I don't believe that men should be allowed or male prisoners should be allowed in women's jails. I would never, ever put any female prisoner in a position where they were vulnerable by putting male prisoners in amongst the general population. So, look, I've said what I had to say on the trans issue, and I'm not going to keep going over this. Okay, well, thanks for answering that question anyway from one of our viewers and listeners there. I just wonder, in regard to Reform UK and in regard to what they can do with the prisons, are you hopeful this can be changed? Are you hopeful we can get prisons back on track, Vanessa? Because there is so much clearly that needs to be done. Look, I can sit and talk to you, Peter, and do nothing about it. You know, Reform asked me, would I advise them on prisons, and I said yes. But actually, you know, if anybody asked me, would I advise them on prisons, I would have said yes. I'm not a political person. I do believe in reform of our prisons. And I do believe that Reform want to reform our prisons. You know, these headlines that keep happening are just another nail in the coffin of the prison service. And if I can help to change things for the better, for the staff that have to work in them, for prisoners who are released back into our communities, then I will try my very best to do that. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy job, because our prisons are in the state they're in, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of change. But if somebody's willing to ask the question, then I'm quite happy to try and answer.
You're willing to help. So you're not a member of Reform UK. Are you going to vote for them?
My political views are my own.
Okay, well that's absolutely fine, but it's just, I mean, some people would question you're advising a political party, but you're not being explicit about supporting them. But you're saying you would advise anybody. I mean, if the Liberal Democrats came to you and said, "Can you advise us on prisons?" you'd be happy to do that, would you?
Well, probably, but they're not going to come to me now, are they? Look, well, my thoughts are on reform is they asked me, I answered, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
At the moment, I haven't answered any questions regarding reform. I've done a statement for them.
Yeah.
I read it out in the press conference, and I'm more than happy to work with Reform to try and reform our prisons.
Well, you certainly have plenty of experience and good ideas as well. Vanessa, thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate that. That's Vanessa Freck, who's a former prison governor and Reform UK Justice Advisor. How can the prison system be reformed? How can we stop the corruption? What do you think we should do? Give me a shout, 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Vincent, who says the fish rots from the head down, and plenty of people getting in touch on this as well. Sally says, of course there's corruption in our prisons. I believe probably also in the Home Office and civil service too. It's the Ministry of Justice, of course, that runs the prisons, but Home Office, I'm sure, well, we know the Home Office has many, many problems. The whole thing needs serious investigation. Of course, we'd have to pay for that, but I don't care. Get the corrupt officers out, says Sally. A tweet from the Home Office this morning: our work with international partners is vital to stopping small boat crossings to the UK. A joint intelligence unit involving the National Crime Agency and French counterparts has helped dismantle at least 52 organised immigration crime gangs operating in France, says the Home Office. Well, we often ask, how many gangs have you smashed? And they're saying that 52 gangs have been smashed, according to the Home Office. We'll talk more about that as time goes on and during the programme. We have Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, and Lucy Beresford, the broadcaster and psychotherapist, who are both with us on the debate desk in just a minute.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse, but it's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody for getting in touch, and we are asking the question this morning about how the prison service can be reformed. How can we make justice pay? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000, and plenty of other stories around this morning as well. Brad has been in touch and says at some stage Nigel Farage must surely instigate an action against Labour politicians such as Angela Rayner for disinformation and for libel, for defamation. These personal attacks and allegations are just beyond normal political discourse. Legal action may rein them in, says Brad in Cambridge. Brad, let me tell you something. In terms of the anti-Farage, anybody but Nigel stuff, they feel threatened by him, and this is just the start. Let me tell you, they will dig up everything he's ever done, every relationship he's ever had, every financial transaction he's ever had, every dispute he's had with a neighbour over the size of a hedge. Everything will be dug up on Farage. They will throw loads of mud at him because they think he can be the next Prime Minister. There is a real threat from Nigel Farage to the established order of Labour and Conservatives, and they're going to go for him, and this is just the start, Brad. But yes, you're absolutely right, and in terms of, I'm sure there's some thought around how this is dealt with, and this is Angela Rayner accusing Nigel Farage of fueling a revenge porn culture. Said he would open the floodgates to revenge porn and fail a generation of young women by scrapping online safety laws. We will talk about that in just a minute on the debate desk. Let me just read out a couple more messages. Margaret in Birmingham says Angela Rayner wants to build over allotments. Now she wants to tax garden sheds, more communities, take more migrants, whatever next, says Margaret in Birmingham. She also liked my John Denver reference yesterday, so thank you for that. I had a particularly bad pun when we were talking about censuses, and I said John Denver would be very useful in filling up my census. So thank you to Margaret for appreciating that appalling joke. Barry says the UK has done its bit assisting Ukraine with cash and weapons. Time to concentrate on domestic matters. But true to form, a British Prime Minister will gamble with the lives of the military to deflect from his difficulties at home. We'll discuss that and lots more on the debate desk with Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist and author who is with us, and Maxwell Marlowe is here too. Hello, sir.
Hello, Peter. How are you?
And hello to Lucy. How are you doing? Maxwell is, of course, the Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. I am fascinated by this story on the front page of the Sunday Times about the prison chief who had links to gangsters and then left with 160 grand payout. This is just crazy. Maxwell, what do you think about this story, front page of the Sunday Times?
I'm not shocked at all, to be honest. This has been going on for a long time. We can't forget this. Do you remember, last year there were stories coming out of prison guards having sex with inmates and filming and whatever else? I mean, this has been going on for a very long time. And, this all, I think, all comes down to pay, fundamentally, and how we reimburse people who do work in the prison service. It is a gruelling job. It's not, you only ever got on the front pages, not if you've done something good, if you get linked up with stuff like this. So I don't think there's a way around this without sticking loads of money into our prisons. A lot of them are crumbling.
It's not just about, it's about, there are moral issues as well, are there not?
Of course there are moral issues, of course there are, but the fundamental thing is, who nowadays wants to go and work in a prison, right? And
the problem was as well that under the Conservatives they got rid of a load of experienced prison officers, brought in younger people who didn't have the same experience, often leave within a short period of time as well, and the people who get to the top, many of them are very, very good, actually know a prison governor who works very hard and isn't corrupt in the slightest, but this won't come as a shock to him this morning.
No, of course not, no. There was a great story last year as well about, prison officers having to sleep in front of the prison, in tents because they couldn't afford accommodation or whatever else. No wonder the people going into the prison service don't have the most sparkling past. I don't think people, I was very lucky, I had a very good university education. Nobody I know has gone into prison service in any form whatsoever. So it's not a shock at all.
The other thing as well is if you recruit 20,000 police officers, people are going to go, hold on a second, if I'm thinking of getting into a job that is physical and involves law enforcement, am I going to go for the less well-paid and more dangerous job as a prison officer, or the more well-paid and relatively anyway less dangerous job as a police officer? Lucy, I'm fascinated by your take on this tale anyway, but particularly from the psychotherapist perspective. This person, very strong allegations in the Sunday Times against Bobby Cunningham, Deputy Governor at His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth. if they're true, and I've absolutely no reason to think that they're not, because Gabriel Pogren's the reporter behind it, brilliant investigative reporter. I just wonder, how do you lead that double life? How do you kind of have that life, that complicated, chaotic life where you're essentially leading two lives?
Well, I thought what was really interesting was buried deep in this story, in the analysis of the whole affair, which kind of reads like a Guy Ritchie movie. Everybody knows everybody else. And at one particular point, there is the head of the counter-corruption unit who is called in to say, should this person be suspended? And she says, I know his dad. His dad is a really good bloke. He comes from a good family. And that you suddenly get this impression of how incestuous that world is. The jobs are given because I know this person, I know there's a job going, do you want to send your CV in, if that's how legitimate it gets. But the idea is that everybody knows everybody. So in fact you lead a double life because this is all you know. And everybody that you know is in this world as well, or your dad is in that world, or your next door neighbour is in that world. It seems a very localised thing. And
also, I mean, my dad's a great guy. Doesn't mean I'm a good person. You know?
Well, but we know that you are, and we know that your dad is.
Oh, you.
Quick, I better get that in, otherwise I'll never be invited back. But there is this rather strange thing, which is it's partly about the world that he lives in that enables him to have an affair, to be allegedly corrupt, but to have nobody come down on him about it because everybody knows everybody else. But also that sense of what is that structure? In your interview with Vanessa Frake, she says very definitely this comes from the top down. If you haven't got the steerage coming from above that leads by example, then it's very easy for everyone to think this is how I can get by. And if it does, there is a factor which is monetary, which is about remuneration, but it's not just about that. It's about how you feel you can get away with things. The very fact that this person was allowed to communicate with people who were part of that world that's just the people they hung out with. It's a bit like a glorified episode of EastEnders, but everybody knows everybody else.
And psychologically?
But that's the world.
That's the world. But if you're living this double life as well, is that just the way things are? Because that is the world that you don't feel you're chopping and changing? We're
very imitative creatures, so we learn about the world by copying the people that we are raised around, and we see how they interact, and we see the kind of friends that they have, and the thing that came across to me above all else was how interlinked all these people were. And so how hard is it for you, even to the extent that they all live in the same area. They all live in the same part of Sheppey. So of course if you're going to get your garden done, you're going to get the bloke down the road. Oh, it turns out that he's also a drug dealer, or allegedly this, or allegedly that. So you can't get away from it. It's very like the world of addiction in a funny way. If you want to go sober, if you want to stop being an addict, you have to change your life so wholesale that you have to start socialising
Extract
with
yourself
people.
from that whole world.
But if this is your world, it's the people you know, your family and your employment, you're never going to change.
We've just had a tweet this morning, Maxwell, from the Home Office, talking about the fact that a joint intelligence unit involving the National Crime Agency and French counterparts has helped dismantle at least 52 organised immigration crime gangs operating in France. That's 52 gangs that have been smashed, allegedly. How do we deal with the problem of organised corruption in our prisons? How do we even begin to get a grip on this, do you think?
Well, I think it's been raised quite well. You have to extract them from the situation, do a geographic, as it's known, just remove them entirely from these areas, because, this prison system is fundamentally...
Is that realistic?
It's difficult. I mean, you could do it if you, have enough resources and you have the care to do it. But as I was saying earlier, you're going to have to find replacements for these people. Prison governors, don't just grow on trees. No, they're veterans of the industry. And being able to change these people around, move them away from the prison system, I think may be incredibly difficult. But it's going to take a lot more than, unfortunately, Gabriel's great, story breaking here. It's going to take a root and branch reform, probably led from the Ministry of Justice, which, as we can tell with this report, not much trust remains.
Well, no, but you've got John Timpson, who has basically been brought in specifically with all of his knowledge of helping prisoners.
Minister, he'll be hopping mad at this.
He will be embarrassed by it, but also there was an incredible scheme for education which basically said, if you're really, really bright, don't go into industry, don't go into financial services, go into education. And we need a similar system here within prisons to be able to say, because as you said, I don't know anybody. I did some work with Brixton Prison, but that's not because I didn't know anybody who was working in that industry. We need to get people who are really super bright, really talented, can think outside the box, to go into these industries and actually transform it from the root up, to be able to say, I am actually going to be a prison officer. In the same way as it didn't used to be fashionable to go into education if you had an ordinary degree, not a PGCE, but if you had an ordinary degree, say, yeah, I'm going to be a teacher. Similarly, I'm going to be a prison officer. That ought to actually now start to become a badge of honour.
Penny in Essex says, good morning, Peter. When I worked in a prison, it wasn't unusual for prison governors to have relationships with prisoners, leaving them wide open to blackmail. That man should be imprisoned, not rewarded, says Penny in Essex. Well, he didn't respond to any of the allegations that the Sunday Times put to him, but this is Bobby Cunningham, the former Deputy Governor of HMP Wandsworth, meeting alleged cocaine traffickers at his house. All sorts of allegations of corruption. Lots more to discuss on that. There's plenty more as well. Zelensky is in Washington tomorrow. We'll discuss that with Lucy and with Maxwell in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch, including Lorraine, who says Labour's gaslighting of Farage over the online safety bill by calling him a supporter of Savile didn't work. The electorate are not stupid. Labour, including Starmer, Phillips and Rayner, have done everything they could to prevent a national inquiry and independent investigations into the Pakistani Muslim rape gang scandal. I mean, in fairness, Starmer has now ordered a national inquiry. He resisted it for a long time, but he is now doing it, so let's just be fair to him. Lorraine continues, just as the Savile slur failed, so will the revenge porn accusations. Labour are really desperate, and Rayner needs to hang her head in shame over Labour's track record with rape gangs and address her own inadequacies before attacking others. Well, let's talk about this story, actually. This is another attack on Nigel Farage. As I said, it's just starting, folks, believe me. Angela Rayner claiming Nigel Farage would open the floodgates to revenge porn and fail a generation of young women by scrapping online safety laws. This is the Deputy Prime Minister warning the removing of protections would enable a vile misogynistic culture on social media. And Reform have hit back, saying it would always prioritise prosecuting abuse, but will never let women's safety be hijacked to justify censorship. And party councillor for Reform, Leila Cunningham, says Ms Rayner, Angela Rayner, she is Miss Rayner, she's not Ms Rayner, she's Miss Rayner, could not claim to protect women while placing unvetted illegal migrant men in communities. So this is about the Online Safety Act. Lucy, your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a two-part story. It's whether the Online Safety Act is fit for purpose, and it's how is Labour treating the Reform Party. And these two stories obviously collide in this one story. It isn't just Reform ministers, and it's not just Nigel Farage who are saying that the Online Safety Act is not fit for purpose. There are worries about whether it actually censors free speech, but more importantly, does it actually work? Because there are so many ways in which you can get around it. As soon as it came in, there were stories about how many people were downloading VPNs in order to access the content, not necessarily because they wanted it to look at nefarious material, but just because they wanted to have a broader sweep of what was on the internet. So there's a fundamental problem about whether it would actually work, and as a sidebar to that, whether it actually keeps women safe, or whether we are slightly being misguided by saying, oh, we must really crack down on this, whereas in fact most women are under threat from men that they know, particularly men that they're in a relationship with, and if you haven't got the police resources to deal with domestic violence, then you really are disserving women. And that's where I think Angela Rayner could really be a powerful spokesperson. You've got Angela Rayner, you've got Jess Phillips, you've got real bruiser women within the Labour Party who could really fight the corner of women. And
But are they? Because there are many questions over Jess Phillips' role, for example, and how she campaigned for such a long time. Then she got the job she always wanted.
Yes,
in the
but then
Home Office.
she has complications within her own constituency because of the racial makeup of that constituency, and there are certain things that she can't say.
But she should be brave and deal with it.
She should be brave.
It's not stuff she can't say. It's stuff she can say. She chooses not to.
But I think Angela Rayner, in a way, she's got a stronger position within the Labour Party itself to be able to use that platform for good. And I wish she wouldn't get caught up in this. But to your point, this is also a story about how Labour is choosing to treat reform. And that is slightly more intriguing, leaving aside whether this particular bill would really help women, which I personally don't think it would. I think that this is, they're in danger of pushing more people towards reform, because Nigel Farage would just be able to turn around and say, it's the establishment, see, I always told you, you know, they're always trying to fight against me, and they are trashing. It's a bit like Hillary Clinton talking about the deplorables. Anybody who starts attacking reform and Farage specifically runs the risk of actually turning him into a bit of a political martyr.
I mean, that was just so stupid.
It was very inept.
A stupid thing to do.
And they doubled down on it, which was even more inept. But the idea that, as you said, that this isn't going to go away, it's actually only going to intensify in the run-up, not just to the general election, but the big elections that are happening in Scotland and Wales next year.
But believe me, there will be, at this moment, there will be a team of people in Labour headquarters who are Team Farage, and what they're doing is they're reading every biography, they're doing internet searches, they're looking into records, they're talking to people who hate him, they're doing all sorts of things to discredit him. That is what they're doing. Political attack, and an attack unit, I am absolutely sure, will have been set up in Labour headquarters because they fear him. They see his poll ratings, and the next election they will try, Labour will try, and it's fine, that's politics, they will try to frame it as an anybody but Nigel election. That is what they will do.
Now, the one error that possibly Nigel Farage and Reform have made at the moment is to say we're just going to scrap the online safety bill and to not have a plan in place. It's just so easy to be able to say,
what plan should they have, Maxwell, do you think?
Can't really have a plan because it's so hard to regulate, right? You've just mentioned the VPNs.
And also, will the legislation ever catch up with the technology?
It can't. It literally can't. I mean, if you read the Act now, as I've done, it is one of the most hack job.
You've read the Online Safety Act?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Loser.
I know that's my job. I'm employed to be a loser. But when you read the Act, a lot of what it does, it just gives powers to the Secretary of State to try and regulate the internet. I've met with MPs who don't even own smartphones, and these people were voting and writing this legislation. They can never catch up with this. The other issue you have is that it's the way in which they do the enforcement. So if you're found in violation of the Act, you could be fined up to 10% of global revenue. All of these companies, they're not based in the UK, they're based in Silicon Valley. So imagine fining Meta 10% of global revenue because one single post on there was found in violation, right? That's what Ofcom can do. Now, what we do know is that when Keir Starmer went to the White House to talk to JD Vance and Donald Trump, they gave him a real telling off saying, don't try to do this because you're basically being a bandit and taking our revenue out of Silicon Valley and putting it into the UK. And now we can see 4chan, for example, which is not a great messaging board, but it's based in Delaware in the US. Their lawyers have just said, you know, they've got no assets whatsoever in the UK. Try and find them, and we'll take it to court in the US. It's not going to happen. So, but also, just onto the reform point, Morgan McSweeney is absolutely terrified, and there is an attack.
Chief of Staff at Number 10.
A group have been set up to do exactly what the Tories did with Ed Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn, to go through all of this stuff to try and work this out. I think the issue there is that you're right. You know, they're doubling down. It's not going to work. They're also backing themselves into a corner because eventually the Online Safety Act is going to have to be either repealed or it's going to have to be massively
reformed. You think it's that serious?
It's really bad. The Americans are livid. They're absolutely apoplectic about this bill. I talk to my American friends, they're laughing at us. Absolutely, they just think it's a complete joke that we have this level of censorship. So it's going to have to be repealed or reformed in some way in the next 3 years, 4 years. And then, what then? How do you attack reform after these sorts of headlines? I think it's a joke piece of legislation, written by people who don't understand the modern world, and it will fail in every instance.
Lucy, final thought on this?
Well, I think that is the point, and it isn't just the fact that it's reform ministers who are saying that this is bad. You can attack reform for saying that they think it's bad, but voters are not stupid. They will notice that Conservative MPs are saying the same thing. Lib Dem MPs are saying the same thing from a freedom of speech perspective. So it will be an attack that will be negated. They'll just have to keep upping the ante. And as I say, at that point, Farage almost becomes like a political martyr for a lot of his followers.
Certainly, and they will say he's so attacked that they're actually going to go for him. Listen, there are lots more messages coming in. Jane says one day the UK Prime Minister will remember he is the Prime Minister of the UK. His own citizens are at rock bottom and he doesn't care. Craig in Staffordshire says, I can tell you now, no gang has been smashed simply because there are no gangs, plural. What we're dealing with is a smuggling network. The only way to bring down a network is to pull the plug by stopping the desire to come to this country. Individual arrests of gang members will have zero effect on that network that's working to get these people across the channel, says Craig. Also, Jane says the more Labour government go on about Nigel Farage, the more the public love him. Labour are toast already. Worst government ever. And Rob says, don't make me laugh. Our government couldn't smash 54 eggs, let alone 54 gangs. And if they were able to smash one, they would end up putting them in five-star hotels as a punishment, says Rob. Lots more to discuss, including what Zelensky will say in Washington, what they will do, and whether Trump has now even changed his position, even since Alaska, even since that summit with Putin. Lots more to discuss on the debate desk with Lucy and Maxwell in just a second here on Talk.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse, but it's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Lots to discuss today. Thank you to Betty, who says Labour famous for having gangs of interns and kids clipping and recording every single piece of news in them, for or against them, and filing in big scrapbooks for the day they open the gulags. The legislation would have been fine if they had not tried to tie their virtue signalling to the basic premise. Nothing to do with kids, seen as an opportunity to stop all the critics, says Betty. Thank you to David, who says refreshing to hear the prisoner advisor there. That is Vanessa Freck there. She's a former head of security. She's written a book called The Governor, actually. You're right to suggest allegiance may fall with the party she is advising. However, she spoke simply, clearly and correctly. Nigel has asked me, and I responded. Really interesting. As continuity among parties through the decades is nil, the new party comes in and reverses previous efforts, says David in Hyams Park. Penny in Essex says all Starmer has smashed is the number of incoming migrants, says Penny in Essex. He has smashed the record on that, certainly. Jane says perhaps we need to ask why there are so many criminals in the first place. Leslie says the two-child benefit cap will be axed by Starmer and co. His backbenchers will ensure, as happened with a benefits bill. We'll talk about the two-child benefit cap with Maxwell and Lucy in just a second. And Mick in Wallington says Starmer is happy to send our depleted working class troops to Ukraine so that he can be relevant in Europe, but he is happy to see our vets sleeping on the streets and continues to persecute them for their brave peacekeeping action in Northern Ireland. He's the ultimate hypocrite Angela, who are the scum now, says Mick in Wallington. Well, that whole issue of legacy in Northern Ireland and soldiers being prosecuted, some of them broke the law. That did happen, but there are many as well who do feel that they are being totally victimised and that there is a witch hunt, and certainly the legislation that was brought in by the Conservatives was dreadful and didn't do the right thing, and Labour are trying to repeal it. What will be the case? We'll continue to cover that story as we often do, and we've talked to Mark Francois about that previously. I want to talk now about the Alaska summit, about what Trump and Trump and Putin talked about. Freudian slip there. Trump and Putin talked about, and also Zelensky in Washington tomorrow. There are possible indications that Trump has actually changed his mind already, even since that Alaska summit, and apparently he supports Putin's demand that Ukraine surrender its most valuable region to Russia in order to end the war. The Russian leader, of course, wants full control of Donetsk, the mineral-rich eastern oblast, including parts that are currently held by Ukraine within the wider Donbass region. And in return, Putin said he would freeze the front line and promised not to take any more territory. But is this just capitulation to Putin? And what does Zelensky say tomorrow? How does that meeting go? It's all been quite nicey recently, a lot more so than that Oval Office showdown previously, Lucy. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, it has been nicey, but I gather that the coalition of the willing, of which we are part, are very worried that Zelensky might say something which would then cause Donald Trump to throw his toys out of the pram again.
Fascinating to see what happens tomorrow.
And there is definitely an argument to say that Volodymyr Zelensky has been so brilliant at being such a focal point for rallying his country around the flag. However, is he going to be a liability at this final juncture? Because it is very true that we've got to the point where we're now having to talk about compromises. And I've spent a lot of time in South Africa. When they had their Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there were a lot of things that just simply had to be agreed to let bygones be bygones. And it's a really painful process. Both sides have to be willing to do it. And at the moment, we don't really see Russia, Putin in particular, minded to do very much. But we are now at the stage where it looks like we might be talking about land swaps, or we might be talking about giving up some land or in exchange for something pretty big, like a virtual equivalent of Article 5, where America does agree to support Ukraine if Russia were to invade in the future. But how it's going to go over the next 24 hours, as you say, it's very fluid. Donald Trump's personality, his psychology, is to, in a funny way, to not become attached to things too much. And because he's not attached to them, he can let them go really easily. So, as I said, Zelensky is very committed to making sure that Ukraine stays intact regardless. And that might not be possible. And Donald Trump's way of dealing with him might be the way forward.
What do you think is likely to happen, Max?
I think, I'm concerned that he will give up Donetsk Oblast, but I think it may have to happen, unfortunately, because Putin has not shown any willingness to stop. The only person who could bring him to the table was Donald Trump, and it was incredibly humiliating for Putin, right? So he had F-22 fighters, B-2 bombers flying overhead. He had to go to a former Russian territory, that being Alaska, to go and speak to a US president who then flew him in front of the free press, right?
Do you think it was humiliating for Putin?
I think it was, yeah. I think it was very humiliating, right? I mean, he's the most sanctioned man in the world, and all he gets is kind of an outcrop of the US state, rather than Zelensky, who gets to go to the White House.
Would he have wanted to go to the White House?
I think he would have done, absolutely, because look at Putin's character. He's very similar, at least in terms of aesthetics. Wanted to show that actually he commands the respect of Donald Trump, whereas Zelensky doesn't, and Trump is. I
mean, there are many people arguing against that.
The theatre of that was that they both came down their planes together. He had a literal red carpet that was rolled out for him. He's under multiple arrest warrants around the world, and yet he was allowed to go to America, which is arguably the big prize. Yeah. Okay, so and he would argue that part of Alaska, yes, that used to be us. That's all part of the narrative of the greater Russian Empire. It was almost reminding people this is where we could go to next. So he was being treated like an equal, not a pariah.
I disagree. I mean, he was walking down this path, flanked by these state-of-the-art jet planes, which Russia could never dream of having. He was overflown by the same bombers which had bombed Iran previously. It was a show of strength strength by America. And I think America, given Donald Trump's dynamic diplomacy, as I would call it, which is not sticking to a single thing, I think...
Strategic ambiguity, I think what he knows it as.
I mean, I'm not sure Donald Trump would even call it that. I mean, he does change his mind all the time on all sorts of stuff. I think the fact is now, Trump now has the playing cards. Neither Putin nor Zelensky nor the Coalition of the Willing actually do. What I am concerned about, though, is that, Trump may end up doing a Chamberlain, which is that, Vladimir Putin, who was said, has written down on paper that he won't do any more invading as long as he gets his bit of Donetsk. The same way that, Neville Chamberlain stood outside of his plane in Munich, waving, saying, I'm waving this piece of paper here in front of you that says that, the Fuhrer...
Peace in our time.
Peace in our time, right? That's my big concern.
I think the plane actually landed in the UK, but anyway.
But I think that is my big concern, and there is a matter of trust here. Nobody trusts Putin, nobody trusts Donald Trump, and people increasingly don't trust Volodymyr Zelensky, especially following some of these big protests he's had in Kyiv over the anti-corruption measures that he's been trying to push through. So it's an area of total tumult. I'm not sure what the next 24 hours is going to look like, but I do think they'll have to essentially give up Donetsk and the Donbass.
I mean, and that's the moment at which you know that Putin has succeeded. That actually, for all of the optics of the bombers going over, ultimately Putin hasn't had to give away anything at all.
Hold on a second. Max in Warwickshire says, Peter, my heart goes out to Zelensky. He's stuck between a rock and a hard place. Thanks to Trump siding with Putin, they're money-grabbing bullies, plain and simple, says Max in Warwickshire. Let me just throw something else in to this. Putin has been attempting to take over Ukraine for 3.5 years. He's only got a fifth of the territory. All the time we are told, this is an attack on the West, we're next, we need to be wary of Putin and all the rest of it. Is he actually that strong, is my question.
I don't think he's that strong at all. I mean, the cost of doing this invasion has been unbelievable. Russia's now the most sanctioned country in the world. Their economy is just a total basket case now. There's been... I mean, it's really hard to put into words how insane this invasion has been. It's not just been for the last 3 years. Remember, they took Crimea.
Sure,
and the world
2014.
The world stood back and did nothing, essentially. A few sanctions here, a few sanctions there, nothing much. Germany then opened a massive gas pipeline, which then the Ukrainians then blew up, which was quite amazing. But I just think, at the cost of Donetsk and I think millions of people who have now died on the front lines, either in Ukraine, either for Ukraine or Russia.
I don't think it's millions, but certainly thousands.
It's a ginormous amount. And then on top of that, you're going to have to rebuild both these countries. Ukraine have got a huge amount of finance coming from the City of London just over here, or from around Europe, plus America, people wanting to invest and rebuild. Russia doesn't have a penny of that. So I think, what has happened here is the sausage machine has been churning away for the last 3 years. It has degraded Russia's ability to re-invade, and now we know that Ukraine have large amounts of stockpiles and large amounts of willing training to stop any sort of invasion coming.
But there was a possibility that if Russia hadn't agreed that there might be further sanctions from Trump, that didn't happen. So there were all sorts of little ways in which there were little wins for Trump, for Putin, in Alaska.
Well, plenty more to talk about that, no doubt. Full coverage tomorrow here on Talk of Zelensky in Washington. I would imagine quite a lot of that will happen. Usually happen around lunchtime, Washington time, which will be during Jeremy Kyle's Drive Time programme. He is here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on Drive. I am here Thursday, Friday on Drive as well, and indeed my programme's next Saturday as well. Let's talk about Lord Kinnock, Neil Kinnock, the Welsh windbag, urging Labour to scrap the two-child benefit cap with Robin Hood economics. He says it should be scrapped and lift children out of poverty. He says rising levels of poverty would make Charles Dickens furious, says Lord Kinnock in an interview with the Sunday Mirror. He's urged ministers to introduce a wealth tax. He obviously led Labour in opposition between 1983 and 1992. There have been quite a number of senior Labour figures, the grandees of the party. Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, recently saying ending the two-child limit as well as the benefit cap would be amongst the most effective ways of reducing child poverty. Kinnock says the government may not be able to scrap the two-child cap all at once. Maxwell, what do you think should happen?
I mean, it's great he's called it, the economics Robin Hood, so a fairy tale. And it is fairy tale economics, right? I mean, he wants to do this wealth tax. It's been put forward, it will raise hundreds of billions of pounds, tens of billions of pounds, whatever, as long as you do it the way the campaigners want. It's never been, replicated anywhere. People look at Spain, where about 90% of the assets aren't taxed. They look at Switzerland, where they don't have loads of different types of wealth tax, capital gain, stamp duty, inheritance tax, etc. So this is totally bonkers. And to look at the cost of this, you look at the IFS, to eliminate the two-child benefit cap, it costs £2.5 billion immediately, and then it rises to £3.9 billion by the end of 2029. That's money we don't have. We're over £2 trillion in debt at the moment. Where is this money going to come from?
The key argument in all of this is, of course, with the two-child benefit cap, is why should a third child be discriminated against from birth when it comes to benefits? Well, that's not fair.
Okay, sure, it's not fair, but I don't think it's fair either on hard-working taxpayers having to pull out more money from nowhere. I think this is really insulting actually to taxpayers, a lot of whom may not actually qualify for benefits in the first place. For example, we know that Tax Freedom Day, the day you stop paying this checker, is the latest in the past 70 years. We know that by 2029 it will be the highest tax burden ever. Okay. It's not fair.
Lucy.
I can't remember who it was, but Lord Kinnock used to be described as the Welsh windbag, and here he goes again.
Also, do these grandees actually have anything to contribute?
No, they're just trying to stay relevant. Whether it is Gordon Brown, who actually does a lot behind the scenes for alleviating child poverty, but Lord Kinnock just wants to have his say. He was never in power. He didn't win that '92 election, famously. So whether you can take him seriously is a moot point. The problem is it comes down to fairness, and voters, human beings in general, are hugely susceptible to issues of fairness. From childhood, we're constantly alert as to who's got what and
who gets to sit in the front of the car.
Who has the bigger bedroom, as Harry was so constantly complaining about, or simply who does mummy or daddy love more. And it's basically about voters saying, well, I can afford to have 2 children, and those people can't, and now they're going to have more children. Now, the scenario that's always then trotted out is, yes, but what if your circumstances change?
Yeah,
you have
someone
3 or
loses
4
their job,
children, or your partner dies, or you separate, and it's a very acrimonious divorce, and the children become collateral damage, which is not necessarily a given. You can definitely have a divorce where that doesn't happen. But those examples are few and far between. It is tricky, and one's heart goes out to people who are having to deal with that situation, but fundamentally voters think, I am only having children when I know I can afford to have those children, when I know I can afford a home, and when I can protect them and give them the things that I want to give my child. If you have more than that, then there should be a cap. It's generous enough to be able to say that there is a benefit that you get given because you have a child, because again, it should really be a personal choice. But for those people who think about fantasy economics, this just feels like throwing money after people just to try to secure their vote, and voters really won't like that.
Final thought from Maxwell?
We spend £331 billion a year on welfare. £81 billion of that is on universal credit. There is no more space to pull money out of the real economy and put it into the benefit system. This would bankrupt Britain, and I don't think we should do it.
Thank you both very, very much indeed. As always, Lucy Beresford, psychotherapist, broadcaster, author, queen amongst women and indeed men. Maxwell Marlowe, Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, and general all-round dapper snapper in your blue jacket today as well.
Dress up for you, Peter,
That's it. Well, there are standards. Thank you both very much for joining us on the debate desk, and thanks also to Mega Vegan, who says Zelensky has been criticising Putin again today. Is it helpful to antagonise the country you'd like to stop attacking you, or does Zelensky actually want the war to continue? His comments never seem to help attempts for peace. Leslie says no lessons from Rayner. She voted against the gang inquiry, and her party are putting girls and women at risk with 50,000 undocumented illegals arriving on their watch. Sean in Bridlington says Rayner and Phillips will do nothing for protecting women, as the Muslim bloc votes in their constituencies would have them ousted. Both clearly put their political careers ahead of all of these, says Sean in Bridlington. Well, thank you for all of your messages, calls, texts, tweets, voice notes and so on that have come through. We will get, of course, to many, many more of them as the show goes on between now and 1 o'clock. And in just a minute after the news, we're going to talk to Gawain Tyler, a former advisor to Nigel Farage, about Angela Rayner's allegations accusing the Reform UK leader of fueling a revenge porn culture. What do you make of what Rayner has said? Let us know your thoughts as well on all of this. 0344 499 1000. We're also asking the question question: how should the prison system be reformed? Let us know.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
Couple of weeks
How
ago.
much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Some breaking news here on Talk, and Ursula von der Leyen is going to accompany Volodymyr Zelensky to Washington tomorrow. The European Commission President and Chesney Hawkes lookalike has just tweeted saying the Ukrainian President has requested she join him for the Trump meeting. She also said other European leaders would be joining, but has not given any details on who they might be. Could Starmer be off to Washington? Zelensky will be meeting von der Leyen in Brussels later today before they head to the United States. Very interesting. Could the second meeting happen? What about Putin? Really interesting stuff there. So that's the breaking news that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will be accompanying Zelensky to Washington tomorrow. Full coverage of that, of course, on Talk. I want to talk as well about Angela Rayner. She's accused Nigel Farage of fueling a revenge porn culture, not content with calling him someone who is an apologist or would be on the side of Jimmy Savile on the Online Safety Act. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, has said that the Reform UK leader is fueling the revenge porn culture. One of his former closest advisors, Gawain Tyler, will be with us in just a second. We'll also talk this hour about Lord Kinnock calling for the two-child benefit cap to be scrapped. What do you make of that? What do you think should happen in regard to the two-child benefit cap? Are you happy for it to be scrapped, the welfare bill to get even bigger than it is already? On all of these topics, let me know your thoughts, including that big story on the front of the Sunday Times about corruption in prisons. The prison chief who had links to gangsters and then left with 160 grand in his back pocket of our taxpayers' money. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can give me a ring, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can send me a voice note. Less than a minute, please. Some of them have been more than a minute, and Tech Up Dave has been very angry indeed. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call, and plenty of ways to get in touch and let me know your opinion. Let's keep chatting here on Talk. Brian says, don't you get it, Peter? Taxing the rich only takes a bit straight to the exchequer. What we need is all that money they hold back to us via spending of that money back in our economy. That's the economy that pays all the taxes. Ernie says, what difference would it make to the security of Russia if it's allowed to steal the Donbass? Here, there's always going to be a border. It's just further into Ukraine. If it's turned into a wasteland buffer zone, fair enough. But if it's just the spoils of war for Russia, what is the point? On the two-child benefit cap, Neil has a very straightforward, simple opinion. He says, if you can't afford children, don't have them. Jason in the Lake District says, Angela Rayner, in the story we're going to talk about next, Angela Rayner is showing herself up for what she is, totally detached from the majority view, and Nigel just needs to let them keep digging as they are finished, and they're only making things worse by coming out with their nonsense. Jason also says, it's fascinating listening to Maxwell's perception of Putin and Trump. I completely agree with him on that. He also says, echoing what Neil has just said, Jason in the Lake District says, if you can't afford children, then don't have them. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss this morning, including this story. It's in the Telegraph today, Sunday Telegraph. Angela Rayner claiming Nigel Farage would open the floodgates to revenge porn, that thing where you may have filmed something your partner has done whilst in a relationship, then you break up with them, you have to get revenge on them, you then put that in the public domain and show them, demeaning themselves, or something that was supposedly private then becomes public. And Angela Rayner says Nigel Farage would open the floodgates to that and fail a generation of young women by scrapping online safety laws. This is a direct attack on the Reform UK leader. The Deputy Prime Minister warning removing protections would enable a vile misogynistic culture on social media. Reform, of course, have hit back on this, saying the party would always prioritise prosecuting abuse, but will never let women's safety be hijacked to justify censorship. Well, let's speak to Gawain Tyler. He's a former advisor to Nigel Farage. Gawain, great to talk to you this morning. What do you make of this attack?
Well, Labour being what Labour seem to be doing at present, which is they've given up on policy, they've given up on ideas, and all they've got is insults, and it's like the schoolyard stuff, pointing fingers at the fella, and it's preposterous. Revenge porn is already illegal and can be prosecuted, and the idea that by protecting freedom of speech online, you will go back. Well, you will create this floodgates. I think that was the word, floodgates.
Floodgates, yeah.
Yeah. Well, what, like 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, that's a fair point. 3 weeks ago, there was not any more.
We weren't drowning in revenge porn. There is revenge porn, and it is prosecuted, and it's ghastly. But the idea that suddenly there's going to be this great outpouring of revenge porn because Nigel Farage wants freedom of speech online seems to be for the birds. Just as when Peter Cardwell said, "Oh, Nigel Farage would support Jimmy Savile."
Peter Cardwell, the technology secretary.
Technology. I mean, this is Labour running out of anything to do or say except, as I say, playground insults.
They have said, Mr Farage has said that he would repeal the legislation completely, warning that it's turning Britain into a borderline dystopian state. Borderline dystopian state, is that not a hyperbole by itself?
Yes, but he's talking about the nation, not as an individual. He's not going to Angela Rayner and saying, "Oi, you, Angela Rayner, you personally voted against the grooming gang inquiry. You want dangers to young women in this country." He's not saying that, is he? He's talking a much more theoretical basis on the dangers to freedom of speech and what that creates in society. She's taken it personal. He's talking politics. Different things.
Is she feeling the heat, do you think, in her constituency, perhaps?
Oh, just a touch. I mean, according to current polling and all the rest of it, she's gone at the next election, and not just gone, but significantly gone. I think it's the current.
I mean, she's currently got a majority of 6,791, which is a relatively healthy majority, is it not?
Yeah, it was, but there's no such thing as a Labour safe seat these days, not after the failures of their government, and quite right too. If you look at what's happening, I suspect we'll have much better idea after May this year, when places like Ashton and Lyme will be polling in local elections. We'll have a far better idea. But right now, people like Angela Rayner are staring back down the barrel of a teal-coloured gun. They know that their constituency is not safe. I think it's flipped to something like there's an 85% chance of Reform winning in that constituency. The current polling, the current projections,
86%, yeah, that's right, to 13% of Labour winning as well, and Reform UK came second the last time, yeah.
Of course, people like Angela Rayner are panicking. I would panic if I was them. But the problem is, if you're panicking, you stop thinking, you start kicking out. It's like rats in a corner. And instead of thinking or doing anything sensible or reasonable, they just come out with scratching and biting, and they look what they are: frightened, scared, incapable of thought.
What should, if Reform UK became the government, what should they do about the problems online, about abuse of people, about revenge porn, about these issues?
I think the bill is so badly written, it does need scrapping. That doesn't mean we don't need something to protect specific groups of people. Not this. I mean, I have a friend who went on to buy a bumper pack of Maltesers for a nephew, and they had to put in age verification to go onto the Maltesers.
To buy some Maltesers.
Yes.
I mean, I know the waistline dangers from Maltesers. I'm not sure I know any other dangers from Maltesers.
Well, precisely. I mean, the threat of being revenge porn by a bag of Maltesers seems to be a bit over the top. The whole process and the way in which the legislation is designed to crack down on social media, not just in the usage that there's very specific small amount of people are doing very bad things, but also across the board, the way in which they're threatening, if something gets through onto social media, the executives, international, global executives of major firms with prison time. That's absurd. It is absurd. We protect journalists of their sources. We protect newspapers from the overweening powers of the state by having those protections. But in the case of social media, no, they don't. And it's like, I don't know, the people who run a river being told that any boat with a baddie on it is the river's fault rather than their own. And there is no...
But don't they have some obligation to deal with this? Shouldn't there be some accountability?
There is, but what we have seen historically when it comes to social media is they become intensely political. It's not freedom of speech. It becomes a very directed concept of what freedom of speech is. We saw Twitter, we saw Facebook working with the Democrats in America very closely to keep out the Hunter Biden laptop and things of this sort from the press. There was a great deal of bias and the complete crushing down of freedom of speech. So we believe that other points of view should be heard, including would love our point of view to be heard, of course, but that's not the point, is it? The point is that one has other points of view that you don't necessarily agree with. And what I see in this government is an organisation that wishes to close down on other points of view, not just... you know as well as I do, Peter, whenever a government wants to do something illiberal, it says, what about the children?
It's a fair point. And Jess Phillips, the safeguarding minister, has said a similar thing. She has said Nigel Farage is happy for online spaces to remain a Wild West. Nigel Farage's reform have shown they have a total disregard for the abuse, hatred and vile criminality of millions of women face online. Reform have no idea and simply don't care about the grave damage their decisions would have. I mean, that's just not true, is it?
It's just not true. And also, the hypocrisy, the cant, the gaslighting of this government. Which government has been allowing a record number of undocumented young males into the country? Which government has been sending around the country into HMOs and small hotels without the local community being informed or aware, giving them no rights to stop it? And we have seen time after time after time some of these undocumented male migrants getting arrested, charged, convicted for sexual abuse of women, and sometimes men even. And this government is the one that points a finger at Nigel Farage, who wants to maintain freedom of speech, and yet itself is presiding over a system which brings in and puts into small villages and towns the people who actually do attack women. Where is the grooming gangs inquiry?
It's not just migrants as well, of course. There are so many people who are from the indigenous population who do the same things as well.
I'm saying I'm not saying that only migrants do it, and not online space, of course. Sure. Not only migrants do it. All I'm saying is this government's cant and hypocrisy about this.
Okay.
That's the point. And no, I agree. Look, the majority of people who abuse girls in this country are British-born British people, of course. because that's the sheer scale of the proportion of the population.
Yeah, of course, 85% of the population. Yeah.
The disproportionality, the percentages of those who are involved in these things are far greater. We've seen was Afghans 22 times more likely to commit sexual offences than
all of
the
that
native population.
Yeah.
So as I say, I'm not arguing that British people don't do these things. Of course they do, and we want to clamp down on them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an appalling case that took place in a summer school at my own school in Dorset, which was a Christian group, and in the end brought down Justin Welby. These were not immigrants; these were our own people.
Yeah.
But that's not the point.
No,
it's
sure.
the hypocrisy that I've got an issue with.
Perfectly valid point. Thank you, Gawain Tyler, there, former advisor to Nigel Farage, joining us on Talk. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. Michelle in London is on the line and has given me a call about this. Michelle, what would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
So that man stole half my thunder. He's amazing. I'm so glad you have him on. I've been reading the papers today, and we've got our own minds.
Mm-hmm.
How to think we do. All it is, I'm really glad Nigel Farage spoke out about this, and I'm behind him 100%. All it is with this online is it's suppressing our freedom of speech. We should know what's going on. When that lady went up in House of Parliament, the way they treated her was unreal.
Yeah, and I think you might be referring to Katie Lamb there, the Conservative MP who tried to talk about this, tried to give descriptions, and that was actually taken offline because of the Online Safety Act as well. I mean, the legislation already isn't working, is it, Michelle?
No, it isn't, because all this is about treating victims like criminals and criminals like victims. This has got to go, Peter. It really, really does. And I'm quite jealous of America. I mean, they've got Nigel Front, what's his name? Trump. And
Donald Trump, yeah.
J.D. Vance. I want J.D. Vance. I've just watched his true story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know he comes from hillbilly royalty?
That's right, yeah. He wrote a book all about it, Hillbilly Elegy, yeah.
Yeah, I watched it on Netflix. It was absolutely brilliant. And he's no fool when they say, oh, he's a nice guy. They're using diplomacy. We are being suppressed. This has got to go. I mean, and on the papers, it says, like, Farage is, like, putting women in fear. I'm sorry, but, like, if I always say it to people, Peter, when they talk to me, I go, I'm sorry, are you drunk? Are you on drugs?
Would you feel more in fear with Angela Rayner as Prime Minister, or more in fear with Nigel Farage as Prime Minister?
She's a disgrace to women. Once people climb up the ladder, they pull it up. But the thing is, it's a long fall down, and it's very lonely. This government has got to go, and I think it's a cheat that they want to bring women into it when they've done nothing on the streets of London. Everything, we've got to get rid of this bill, because we're not stupid people. You know, like the song, you can fool some people sometime, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
Listen, thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate your points today.
You're absolutely gorgeous, you are.
Thanks, Michelle. That's very kind. Clearly a woman of great taste. Really appreciate that. Breaking news that the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is going to be joining the talks in Washington. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is going to Washington as well. We're putting a call into number 10 right now to find out if Starmer is going. It seems that all the European leaders, certainly Giorgia Meloni, Friedrich Merz of Germany, and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, are all going to Washington with Zelensky for these talks with Starmer. That's going to be a major event tomorrow. We will, of course, bring you full coverage here on Talk. We're asking number 10 whether Starmer is going. I wouldn't be surprised if he is, in fact, going tomorrow. We'll find out what's happened there. Thanks everybody who's been in touch as well, to the person who says Rayner may be gone after the general election, but she may be made a Baroness, God help us. And this person says, I wish the name for the two-child benefit cap was changed. It's not the same as child benefit, which just causes confusion. The two-child benefit cap is more in monetary terms and is in fact almost double. I agree for it not to be scrapped. And Stuart from Ramsden Bellhouse says, great show as usual, Peter. How can that nasty, bitter fool Rayner talk about safety and women when she continues to cozy up to the Muslim vote and shout that anyone anti-immigration are far right, double standards, two-tier, you could even say. What do you think about this? 0344 499 1000. We'll take more of your views and see if any other European leaders in the next few minutes are announced as going to Washington in just a few minutes here on Talk. Stay with us.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we've spoken to number 10 and they're neither confirming nor denying that Keir Starmer is going to Washington tomorrow. I would not be surprised if he goes. We know that Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, and the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are going with Ursula von der Leyen and Volodymyr Zelensky. So you've got the German, the French, the European Commission, and of course the Ukrainian president all in Washington tomorrow. I'd be very surprised if Keir Starmer doesn't go as well, especially given his key role, as he would put it anyway, in the coalition of the willing, those who are supporting Volodymyr Zelensky. We'll bring you, as soon as we get confirmation one way or the other from number 10, we will of course let you know. I want to play a couple of voice notes now. You can send these in, of course, 0344 499 1000. Mike has been in touch about the Ukraine-Russia war.
Hi Peter, this is Mike from Cheshire. Great show as usual. Just a thought, this intractable problem of Ukraine, how about if the Ukrainians and Zelensky gave up the land that Putin is after in exchange for membership of NATO? That would probably prevent Putin from going any further into Ukraine. Cheers.
Mike, I think that's a reasonable suggestion. The question is whether giving up any of the land is actually just capitulation to Putin. Plenty more to talk about in regard to that. No doubt that will all be discussed tomorrow in Washington. Let's hear a couple on prisons as well. There are quite a few people getting in touch about that. Let's hear what Kate has to say.
Morning, Peter. It's Kate from Leeds. Now, I worked in the prison service for a long time and I retired in 2019, and thank God I did. I've worked with some fantastic prison officers, but I've also worked with some corrupt ones. Corrupt in every organisation, from officers to drug workers who, you know, they start having affairs with inmates and stuff like that. And it's absolutely appalling. How do we change it? I don't think the checks are done as how they used to do it. The checks, and people need looking into properly, because I'm just shocked. This Wandsworth governor or whoever he is, I don't know what he's up to. I don't know what nationality he is, but yeah. You've got to have your wits about you when you're working in these places, and all the courses in the world won't ever help you to what really goes on in a prison. But you know what's right and wrong at the end of the day. Good show, Peter. Thank you.
Kate, thanks for your message there. It's Bobby Cunningham. He's the Deputy Governor at His Majesty's Prison Wandsworth that all these allegations are against. Very, very serious. Subject of internal whistleblowing reports after transferring serious criminals to open prisons. He sent a fraudster to an open conditions, even though the Financial Conduct Authority warned he could tamper with overseas assets. He was having an affair with the manager of Wandsworth Intelligence Hub, responsible for handling reports of crime whilst facing questions over his conduct. Absolutely dreadful allegations there. The Sunday Times put them all to him and he didn't respond to any of them. We know, of course, that he was given a big payoff, 160 grand payoff, and allowed to retire on medical grounds. That money was eventually asked for back. On this prison's point, Ian in Chesterfield has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Ian, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that my father was a prison officer for 27 years, and he worked on the lines of being strong, tough, honest, but fair. And things were very different. It's very woke and soft in prisons now, I'm afraid. There were no drugs. An attack on a prison officer was so rare, and they were treated very harshly if they did anything like that. Now we've got murderers access to boiling water. It's all too soft, it's too woke.
I think a lot of people will really agree with that, especially when there are all sorts of attacks on prison officers, even at places like His Majesty's Prison Franklin, which is where some of the most dangerous people in our society are. Is your father still with us, Ian?
He's not anymore.
What do you think he would make of it, though?
I don't think he'd last long. I think he'd get the sack because, to be quite honest with you, the inmates were just a little bit scared of staff back then.
Maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Even abusive language, there were ways and means where they could make the prisoner's life a little bit tougher if they started doing things like that. You know, the rights weren't quite as good. Nowadays, it just seems that we're treating these people too fairly, if you like. And I think you're right. I think being slightly scared of a prison officer is maybe a good thing.
Well, we all know the teachers even in school who we respected, but we just kind of wouldn't mess with them. You know, we respected them, but we're slightly in fear of them, which is in no way how I feel about Julie Hartley-Brewer. Ian, that's the main thing. Ian, thank you for your thoughts. Really appreciate that. Thanks for the call this morning. Good morning, Peter. Says this person says Elsa, Labour are beneath contempt. Angela Rayner's revenge porn comment shows how low they will sink. Maybe Miss Rayner has reason to fear it, but not everyone else lives with that fear. Most decent women would not put themselves at risk in that way. Only those with no morals would be concerned. Rayner is an immoral person to suggest Farage would be encouraging it. I'm not a supporter of this, but can't believe how bad these Labour politicians are. Than Elsa's opinion there. Thank you for it. Rachel says either Angela Rayner is stupid or she thinks the electorate is. She didn't want a national investigation into the rape gangs, and this is outrageous. Bless you for highlighting this. You're amazing, says Rachel. I don't think I'm an amazing person, but Rachel, I appreciate your message and thank you. In terms of Karen in Bournemouth, she has given me a shout as well on the online safety bill, this controversy, this attack on Nigel Farage. Karen, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
First thing, that all departments have a statutory duty to safeguard children.
Yeah.
Whatever they are, schools. They're failing dismally because they're brainwashing the poor souls. You've got courts letting out child rapists or letting them off. So they're all failing in their statutory duties. They couldn't care less about kids. So for them to all stand there and start calling the, pot.
Do you really think the system couldn't care less about kids? Do you not think there are some really good social workers in there who do care about people? There are some judges who bang people up for a long time. It's not the whole thing, Karen, is it? It's some of it, definitely, but it's not the whole system.
It is a large proportion of it. I mean, you look at the times they're putting people into the community with having no idea whether they're rapists, child abusers, murderers. So they're failing completely in any statutory duty. They're not actually doing what they're supposed to do. You've got, the judiciary saying, no, we can't deport these people if they are, rapists for some feeble things. So they're failing in their own duties in the first place. So they got absolutely no right to preach to anybody else. And the last point is, if their children are raped and the kid comes home and says, "Mummy, I've been raped," what are you going to do? Say, "Don't worry, dear, you're just a piece of meat." And that's what they're doing.
And there's so many children who are badly looked after by the parents as well, who then put them in vulnerable positions. I mean, this is a huge, huge problem. And Karen, you're absolutely right to highlight it and to talk about it. And thank you for your call. 0344 499 1000 is the number she called. Chris in Sturchley in Birmingham has said, sorry, my English geography is appalling, as you know. Just on this story about the Sunday Times, the prison chief who had links to gangsters said, why on earth was he having criminal bosses in his home if he wasn't conducting unofficial business? Well, certainly you can read the whole thing in the Sunday Times today. It's on the front page, and Sturchley in Birmingham is how you pronounce it. Thank you to one of the people behind the scenes telling me that. Apologies, my English geography isn't very good at all, although I've seen quite a lot of the country, must be said. And a final one just before the break. Genuine question, is the fact Ursula von der Leyen is going to the US because they don't trust Zelensky to do it on his own, says Jane, or maybe he just wants a bit of backup from her? We'll continue to talk about that. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, lots more to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Keep the calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. Let me just read out a couple more messages, including from Brad in Cambridge. He says, I can hear little Keir jumping up and down shouting me too as we speak. Donald's poodle, says Brad in Cambridge. Chris says, I think it makes sense for the European leaders to join Zelensky to supper him. They need him to be on a united front. I think scupper is what you meant there, Chris. Dean says, with the Euro leaders going to Washington for talks with Zelensky, I'm surprised. Maloney is going. I fear there is now a greater risk of a third world war now. Many of the EU leaders know the communist EU is slowly dying. Ian in Chester says, on the talk of reform in government, all Farage wants, I believe, is to just be a disruptor and not a decision maker. He fears responsibility and accountability the most. They are poison to him for this reason. They're like poison to him. For this reason alone, I'm certain he'll scuttle, I think he means scupper, Reform UK's chances of winning the next general election by deliberate but very subtle mistakes, says Ian. You really think Nigel Farage is going to scupper Reform UK's chances, Ian? I'm not sure I agree with you. Starmer can't go to Washington. He is no leader, says Tim. And Jane says, of course Starmer will be going. What's the saying? No show without punch. Well, we will see whether Starmer's going. We've asked Number 10. They will make an announcement before too long. My WhatsApps are lighting up. Various people saying that he may or may not be going. We will find out before too long anyway. Keep your thoughts coming in. Should Mr Starmer go to Washington? 0344 499 1000. Well, a former Labour leader, Neil Kinnock, Lord Kinnock, he has said that the two-child benefit cap should be scrapped. He has said that that's what Labour should do. He said it would be fair. He says it's something that would make sure that children are taken out of poverty. There have been a number of Labour grandees and others as well who have said that this should happen, including Gordon Brown. Well, Kitty Stewart is Professor of Social Policy at the London School of Economics and Political Science, the LSE. Kitty, great to talk to you this morning. What do you make of Neil Kinnock's comments on this?
Well, he's absolutely right. I mean, if the Labour Party is committed to getting child poverty falling by the time of the next election, and if it doesn't scrap the two-child limits, there's very little chance. I would say there's no chance that will be happening, and in fact, child poverty will be rising. So this is first by far the most effective way to reduce child poverty, and it's very difficult to see how child poverty can come down while this policy remains in place, because it really embeds poverty into our system. It effectively doesn't deliberately, explicitly doesn't provide families at times when they need extra help with the help that they need. So it makes child poverty, inevitable.
Do you accept that the welfare bill needs to come down overall, Kitty?
The welfare bill is very high, and certainly it needs to be looked at and considered, and I think in terms of possibilities for, in the longer run, getting people back to work and so on, particularly rising levels of people on disability benefits. But at the same time, I mean, the way to get that bill down is not actually to cut it. I know that sounds a little bit odd, but by cutting benefits, people living on who are reliant on benefits for part of their income, they need that support now. And all the evidence tells us that if you cut that support away, it doesn't mean that people kind of get up and go off and get a job and work more. And many people, half the people in receiving two-child limit are actually already working. Where people aren't working, there are lots and lots of barriers facing them. And I think the thing to do is to address those barriers. Our own work, looking at the two-child limit, we looked very explicitly at whether, because one of the goals was that it would encourage people more into work and therefore bring the benefit bill down. And what we find is that that hasn't happened. And in fact, there's even some evidence that it's made it harder for people to work. And that's because, well, many reasons. Firstly, there are multiple barriers and reasons why people aren't working, often to do with disability or disabled children. And when you're living on a very low income, the strain of that and the work of getting by actually it takes a lot of your efforts and energies, and it actually makes it more difficult for people to work.
Kitty, we'll come back to this in just a second. Just bear with me just for a second, because we've got some breaking news, and that is that more European leaders are going to Washington tomorrow to support Zelensky. The French President Emmanuel Macron, the Finnish President Alexander Stubb are the latest European leaders to say they will attend with Zelensky and Trump's meeting in Washington tomorrow. Maybe Kitty's going, maybe I'm going, I don't know, I haven't been told. Everybody seems to be going to Washington. We will return to that. So apologies to interrupt you, Kitty, but we just needed to bring people that breaking news as we had it. Kitty, I suppose the question I have is, look, I don't think there are too many people who want any child to be in poverty. I don't think there's anybody saying just get on with it and live with it. I don't think there's a lack of compassion in our society. What there is a lack of money, and what there is are people who are taxed to a very large degree. There's so many people who contact me all the time who are maybe taking on extra hours, they're doing extra work, they're taking longer, they're working more in the month to get the money they get at the end of the tax system. And to scrap the child benefit cap would cost money. Now, money, of course, only comes from growth, which the government has not been able to get to the same degree. It comes from putting up taxes, very politically disappointing for a number of people, but many people feel it should happen. Or it comes from moving money from elsewhere. Well, lots of departmental budgets have been cut already. Many people say it is stretched. Or it comes from borrowing. Which of those four things would you use to get the money to scrap the child benefit cap? Because a decision would have to be made, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. And obviously that's a difficult decision for the Chancellor, no question. But I think two things are really important. One is that this is very short-term thinking to think that saving us £4 billion now by not cutting the two-child limit is a sensible policy in the long run, because the costs of child poverty to the economy right now are huge. They're estimated at about £39 billion a year. So we're already spending a lot of money on things like extra health, extra education, supporting children who live in poverty. The costs in the longer run to the taxpayer in terms of reduced taxes paid by those children who are not going to fulfil their potential. So we know the costs are huge, and actually this is a small amount to save. You know, sometimes you have to spend.
I mean, they attempted as well to save $5 billion recently with the welfare reforms. The Labour backbenchers wouldn't agree to that, and that caused huge problems for Keir Starmer politically. Also, I mean, we've had a number of people texting me, tweeting me this morning to say quite simply, don't have 3 children if you can't afford them. And there will be people watching and listening to this programme. I know there are changes in circumstance. I know there are all these arguments about, you know, someone loses their job or there's a marriage breakup or whatever. But there will be people watching and listening to this programme right now who have made a decision to say, well, we can afford 2 children, but we can't afford 3. They'll look at people who haven't had that dilemma, or maybe have had that dilemma but have chosen to ignore it, or have done, or whatever has happened, and they've had more children, and they'll say, that's not fair that they and the state should pay for more people by scrapping the 2-child benefit cap. What would you say to that point specifically, Kitty?
I would say that, you know, there but for the grace of God go I guess. I've got 3 children myself and I've been fortunate. So you kind of dismiss all of those arguments a little bit in terms of people lose their job, people become disabled, people's relationships break down. You know, these are real things that happen to real people. It's not that people...
I'm not dismissing any of that. I know that happens. But what I'm saying is there will be some people who will just say, I'm just going to keep having kids and the state will provide.
That is really not there. That's not the case. You know, you present.
I mean, it is the case sometimes.
You find one family like that, and therefore 100 families get sort of painted with that brush. You know,
they do exist, though. I mean, it is factual that those people exist.
It's factual that they exist. Well, maybe, but I suppose there's a question here about who we make policy for, and I guess this is a broader question. You know, if there are tens of families where people are working very hard. Perhaps, you know, I know a family, someone's a nurse, someone's working as a lorry driver, he becomes disabled and they've had 3 children at a time where things were going well for them, and now they need support. And we're kind of saying to that family, look, there is a family over there somewhere out there who's done the wrong thing, and therefore we're creating policy with that family in mind and not the very many tens of families like yours. So in essence, what we're saying then is, you can only have more than 2 children if you are never going to need help from the state. So if you're very rich, if you're very, very wealthy, you've got private wealth, you know, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, George Osborne, they all have... 3
Conservatives there. Any Labour or any other political parties you like to add there?
Worker, you know, shouldn't you be able also to make those decisions? And so to those families that are struggling, I mean, absolutely, I hear that. And this is not only about, there are a number of different policies we need. And I think where people are struggling, we need to look at those. But the answer to those people's problems is not to allow many, many children to grow up in poverty, because that's costing all of us in the long run.
OK, Kitty, thank you for joining me. Kitty Stewart, Professor of Social Policy at the London School of Economics. What do you make of what Kitty said there? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And just to update you, if you missed what I said earlier on, loads and loads of leaders. Do we have a list of all of them? There's the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the Finnish President Alexander Stubb. We've got Ursula von der Leyen, Zelensky, I think that's 5. Giorgia Meloni is 6. I would be astonished, 6 so far. I'd be astonished if Starmer's not going. We have asked number 10. We'll see what happens and whether he confirms one way or the other whether he is going to Washington in regard to that meeting with Zelensky and Trump tomorrow. Plenty of people getting in touch about child poverty as well. Everyone says that if a child is in child poverty, they cannot fulfil their full potential. Says this texter, there may even be a case for this one. It's always been the way, even in the past. Look at J.D. Vance over in America. He started with nothing. He's now vice president. Chris Newbury says there's a clear correlation between the number of professors of social policy and the size of the benefits bill. The only policy Kitty and her ilk have is to put up taxes and give more money away. That's it. In fairness, Kitty did explain her reasoning for that. She did say that it costs more money in the longer term before slagging off 3 Conservatives with lots of children, none of whom are in receipt of benefits. Anyway, Leslie says Starmer will refuse to go to Washington. He wants to concentrate on the issues in the UK, especially the dingy lot, says Leslie, I think, perhaps with her tongue in her cheek. And John says the EU is irrelevant. They did nothing for the first 3 years until Donald Trump started speaking to Putin. John, you've hit on a really, really good point there. And I just want to talk about this because there's so many people who are slagging off Trump and saying, well, he's not going to get anything out of this. This process is not worthwhile. Why is he talking to Putin? Why is he involving Zelensky? Why is he doing all this? He's talking, okay? He's talking. He's talking about peace. He's talking about an end to the war. It may not be what we want. It may not end up exactly what we want it to be. But he's actually talking about peace. He's not just saying, give more munitions. that will kill more people, kill more Russians and Ukrainians. He's not just saying feed the war machine, which some people would do. And in fact, I spoke to Sir Gerald Howarth the other day, who, you know, we had a really respectful, really interesting interview, but that was essentially his position with which I fundamentally disagree. The point is that Trump is talking. He wants to make peace. Is that appeasement? Well, you can have your view. 0344 499 1000. Jan's been here, been in touch on WhatsApp and says, I'm just asking a question, please, as I don't know the answer. Why doesn't the European leader ever directly ask to meet Putin themselves? I don't understand that. Sorry for the ignorance. So, thanks, Jen. Jen, don't apologise for a second. Certainly getting these people in the same room is very, very difficult. The plan is, from Trump anyway, to have the second meeting, may involve Zelensky and Putin, getting them in the room, maybe the other European leaders as well. They're probably planning this at the meantime. Of course, Putin is someone who has a lot of indictments, a lot of arrest warrants and various things about him at the moment. They don't want to negotiate with him directly. They'll also feel, I would imagine, Jen, that they want to do it collectively. They want to do it together. They want to come from a position of strength, because their position, especially people like Ursula von der Leyen, but others as well, like Friedrich Merz and Emmanuel Macron, the French and the German and French leaders as well, they will think that this is an attack on them. This has been the narrative for a long period of time. They want to sort this all out, not just Ukraine, but the whole of Europe together, and say, you know, Putin, back in your box. We'll do a deal with you, but you can't attack anybody else. So they'll want to do it together, they'll want to plan it, and then they'll want to go to Putin with a plan and negotiate with him as a collective bunch of people, not just sort of Zelensky against Putin, which they will argue is not a fair fight. I hope that answers your question, Jen. Thanks for it, and don't worry about not knowing things. Don't worry about, you know, saying Jen says I'm ignorant of this or whatever. Don't apologise for any of that. If the stuff you don't know, if the stuff you want to be explained, if there are questions about our stories that you don't feel we're giving you the full aspect of, if there are extra facts you want to add, if there are comments, we want to hear from you. And I love that from Jen. I love that from people just saying, look, just tell me, I don't know. And the thing is, I don't know everything. I certainly don't. That's why I do these kind of interviews with experts, because they tell me stuff and we're learning all the time. I'm 41 years old. I'm learning every single day, and I certainly don't know everything. Far, far, far from it. Plenty more coming. We'll take some voice notes and indeed your calls in just a minute here on Talk. Stay with us.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Plenty on prisons coming in, including from Judy, who has sent this voice message.
Good morning, it's Judy from Altos, West Yorkshire. Making the prisons better. They should be taken back under government control. I worked with a lady once and she applied to be a prison officer and it took her months. I think they went back to Beauvoir to check her family and that's how it should be. And they should have good pay, good housing and all the 9 yards that they took off them. Thank you.
Judy, thank you very much indeed. Kitty has been in touch on ideas about prison reform.
Good morning, Peter. Kitty from Kent here. On the subject of prisons and our public sector in general, all the while we've got weak leaders, inexperienced, unaccountable, zero expectation of personal responsibility, nothing's ever going to change. Our prisons need to be places where people fear to go. And our frontline staff in all our public sectors, but if we're just looking at prison staff, they need to be well trained and they need to know they will have the support of government, of their leadership. They need to know that we need to know, therefore, that they won't then become corrupt, and that if they do, there is going to be a severe consequence and accountability for them and their leadership. I would send in the SAS or ex-SAS types to run our prisons, and I think prisons should just be really brutal, fearful places. I also think the worst prisoners should lose their right to human rights, and religious freedoms should go because they are taking over our prisons. I don't know a politician that would do this, do you? I just think it's a bit of a lost cause. Our public sector is broken. Sorry, Techie Dave, that went over by 7 seconds, so I know it won't get played.
What happened at the end there? I don't know what happened at the end there, but there was some... Oh.
Sorry, Techie Dave, that went over by 7 seconds, so I know it won't get played.
There were some extra sounds there at the end. It did go over by 7 seconds. And speaking of severe consequences, Dave says that he's going to sentence you to 25 years of hard labour for going over by 7 seconds. No, Kitty, on a more serious note, you make some really, really good points there. Thank you for those. I don't think there is any political party that would do what you have suggested there, but there's a lot of sense in it. The one thing that I really think is the best idea in all of that, and there are some really good ideas in that message, is former military people being involved in prisons. I think they should be in the police. I think they should be in our prisons. I think we should incentivise them. I think we should smooth the pathway for people who are leaving the army to go into, or the armed services in general, to go into those professions, because I know some of them do, but not enough. And I think, there should be recruiting procedures where they say, right, we want to get everybody who is 2 years away from the end of their military service, and we're going to get them in a room and we're going to say, right, we want to let you know that there are some really good careers available for you. You have the skills, you have the experience and the insight that we want in our prison service, in our police. Please join us. Don't have a university degree? Don't care. You shouldn't have to have that to be a police officer and or indeed a prison officer, and that is something that I think we need to look very, very carefully at. But Kitty, thank you very much for that. And yes, going over the 7 seconds, we allowed it this time, but as I say, 25 years hard labour if you do go over 1 minute. We've 3 more, 51, 28 and 35 seconds. All those people are fine and we'll have early release. Let's speak to Michael in High Wycombe. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Peter. Love to talk to you again. And it makes me smile and laugh and challenge at the same time.
Great stuff. I'm glad to hear it. What would you like to say today, Michael?
So the whole thing about all these European leaders, but especially EU leaders, going to Zelensky's aid, the EU in 2024 imported 18% more Russian gas than they did the previous year. The simple fact is that all these people wring their hands, but they fund the Russian war machine. Putin couldn't have a war economy if he wasn't exporting fossil fuels. And that's the challenge, and Trump called this out years ago with the Germans in the UN. I'm sure you remember when they laughed at him.
Yes, I do remember this. Yeah, someone mentioned this yesterday, actually. Yeah. No, it's a really good point, Michael. It's a really good point. There is hypocrisy here. There's no doubt about it. There's also hypocrisy in regard to the criticism of Trump, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, because he is talking about peace. He's moving this process forward. He's the one who's putting the momentum into this. I should say, just before you respond to that, Michael, that we have another name now. The NATO Secretary-General, Mark Rutte, will be joining the leaders of France, Finland, Germany, Italy, Ukraine and the EU, who are all going to Washington. So this is a big deal. I'd be very surprised if Starmer's not going. No word from Downing Street just yet in regard to that. But Michael, will they help, do you think, or actually are they just too compromised already in regard to what you're saying a second ago?
Well, leading question. I mean, obviously, I would consider them all compromised. But the main issue, as you point out, is that the political world, is full of deals. That's how it works. You used to work in this field. You know that's how things happen. And
compromise. I mean, maybe Zelensky needs to compromise. Maybe the West needs to compromise in order to get this over the line, to get peace, to stop the killing. But then should that happen? There are loads of big questions around this.
Yeah, that's the problem, though, isn't it, Peter? It's not the matter of whether compromise will work. It's whether it's whether Putin will stand by his word and not re-invade Ukraine or indeed other countries. And that is what he broke the Minsk agreement on, the Concord. He said he wouldn't do it, and he turned around in 2014, walked straight into Crimea, and has done everything ever since to frustrate any sort of peace. And he doesn't, the Russians for years, centuries, have not worried about their people. They've always thrown them into the meat grinder, which is the wars have been involved in. And it's a historical fact. People can't argue with that.
Yeah, I make Freudian slips all the time, Michael. I was very, very amused by your Stalin and Putin one there. You know what they say about Freudian slips, Michael? One tends to lead to a mother. Michael, thank you very much indeed. That's Michael in High Wycombe there. Let's play another voice note, I think. This one is about Labour and reform. It comes from Nick.
Morning, Peter. Nick from Loughborough. The lack of political acumen that has been displayed for the last 12 months or so by swathes of the Labour front bench, the cabinet, is now being displayed even further as Rayner decides she's going to now take on Farage. The political acumen is lacking in so much as they haven't yet recognised that Reform have reached the 31-32%. That's a critical mass in electoral terms. And if they go for Farage now, as they surely will, it's only going to bolster his popularity. Look what happened to Trump when they started trying to take him down with lawfare, etc. Farage will benefit from this. I'm glad he will. Have a good day, Peter.
Thanks, Nick. Good thoughts there, as always. Always good to hear from you, Nick. And I mean, I can't disagree with very much of that. It must be said. Just on the all these leaders going to America, we are going to talk to Steve Gill, the former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations, in just a few minutes. And just to confirm that full list of people who are going to Washington tomorrow to support Zelensky. This is, of course, before the potential second meeting between Putin and Trump, and it may even involve that meeting may involve Zelensky. But tomorrow in Washington, Zelensky's going. He's bringing quite a few people with him to meet Trump at the White House. The NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, the Ukrainian President Zelensky, of course, is going himself, and the EU European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are going. All of those people are going. We'll talk to Steve about that in a second. We'll get all of your views on it as well. Many more people want to come in on prisons as well, on Trump, on the direction of this country, on Putin and what he's doing, about Angela Rayner and her attacks on Keir Starmer as well. There are lots and lots of different views, and we will get to all of them between now and 1 o'clock. Let me just read out a few more messages. Leslie says, please, not another nauseating scene of Starmer hugging Macron in Washington. Thank you to Tony. He says, I left the UK 27 years ago and could see the influx of immigrants among other things. I visited family for the first time earlier this year in Nuneaton, my hometown. It broke my heart to see how the place was just the number of Turkish barbers, the closed shop, the people's neglected. I've been following the progression of the Uni Party destroying the country. I would certainly fight for King and Country to bring it back to a proud nation. The Prime Minister is a disgrace. The sooner he is replaced, the better, says Tony. Gareth says, local recruitment always allowed prison officers to know prisoners on the outside because they lived with them, they grew up with them, and they were friends with them. When I joined in 1994, you went where you were sent in the country, so I didn't have that issue. You need ex-military to join the prison service. You also need people to join later in life. 18 is way too young. And just finally, before the news, from Cliff in Berkshire, he says, "Morning, Peter. I suspect salaries are an issue in some areas with prison recruitment. I think the government has tried to do too much on the cheap. They fired the experienced staff and replaced them with cheap, inexperienced people. Too few prison officers, too many auxiliaries. One must also question the quality of the vetting. Do they even do psychological evaluation as part of the recruitment process now?" Cliff, I don't know the answer to that, I must say, but thank you for your message. You also sent a very nice message I didn't read out yesterday, but thank you for it nonetheless. Also, this person says, "Send in two-tier Starmer, our hero, not. He can take an invitation of another state visit for Trump. Joke. God help us lot stuck in Europe. War is around the corner." Well, Steve Gill, who's a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations, he's going to be with us in a second. We'll talk about Trump's different line, even since Alaska, on Ukraine. We'll also talk about all these leaders who are heading to Washington. It's going to be a very busy day. We'll bring you full coverage here on Talk, and I want your views as well. 0344 499 1000.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips, in Leeds it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12.60. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
A couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. For any of you who think he's a man of the people, I nearly said you're a...
Keeping it real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here for the next hour and there's an awful lot to talk about. Mark Rutte, Emmanuel Macron, Alexander Stubb of Finland, Friedrich Merz of Germany, Giorgia Meloni, President Zelensky, Vladimir Zelensky, and the one and only Ursula von der Leyen, all on their way to Washington. Will Starmer be going too? This is a big meeting tomorrow. Clearly the stakes are very, very high. We've learned all of that really in the last hour or so. Trump has also backed Putin's land grab in Ukraine. Has he softened his line even since Alaska? We'll talk to Steve Gill, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Loads of people want to make their points heard, and please join them on 0344 499 1000 in doing so. We were talking about prisons today. This big story, the front page of the Sunday Times, revealed the prison chief who had links to gangsters and left with 160 grand of your money in his back pocket. We're also talking about Trump. Should he get the Nobel Peace Prize? Some people say he should. Angela Rayner as well, throwing shade on Nigel Farage. She says that he doesn't care about women and girls in this country. One of his former advisors, Gawain Tyler, has told us this morning that is absolute guff. What do you think of all of this? 0344 499 1000, the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on the main number. One more time, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us. Well, all that is happening in Washington is really, really significant. As I said, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the President of France Emmanuel Macron, the President of Finland Alexander Stubb, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, the European Commission President and Chesney Hawkes lookalike Ursula von der Leyen, and indeed the President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky will all be going to Washington tomorrow. No word from Downing Street. We have asked them whether Keir Starmer is going, neither confirmed nor denied by them. If they let us know in the next 55 minutes, you will know as soon as I do. So the big question is, can there be movement on this? We've seen, of course, in Alaska, Trump and Putin meeting on Friday. So there's an awful lot to discuss in all of this. I want to talk to Steve Gill, who is a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Steve, you're very welcome to the programme. This has been quite a dramatic development, certainly in the last 48 hours or so. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think it is a great opportunity for President Trump to look these leaders from the West in their eyes and say, look, you guys are wanting to take on the responsibility and the accountability for Ukraine. The U.S. has sent hundreds of billions of dollars that can't be accounted for. There's been no accounting. And, Zelensky himself has acknowledged that he doesn't know what's happened to a couple of $100 billion. So I think it's a great opportunity for President Trump to look at Ursula von der Leyen and the rest of the crowd and say, okay, you guys start pulling out the checkbooks. You guys pay for this if you want to continue the fight to go on. Mm-hmm. I think this is a bit of a trap for those leaders. I think President Trump, in talking with Putin, recognizes the reality on the battlefield, recognizes that there will be a transfer of some territory, and yet you still have Zelensky and many of these leaders saying, not 1 inch. Not one inch. Yeah. I don't think you're going to see Russia back out of Luhansk and Donetsk and Mariupol. So that's a non-starter. They are still insisting that NATO expand into Ukraine, which the U.S. and the West have promised for decades would not happen. Those are non-starters. And I think this may be a trap for these Western European leaders and Zelensky for Trump to say, guys, I brought peace to the table. You said no. It's now on you.
Yeah, it's interesting, Steve. It's interesting, Steve, in that regard, because I just wonder, just on this idea of a trap, I think that might be right, because I wonder if Trump calculates this and says, I want to do a deal. I'm going to do a deal. I'm going to say these are the terms, and there are suggestions anyway that he agrees with Putin's demand that Ukraine surrender Donetsk, the mineral-rich eastern bit, including parts that are currently held by Ukraine within the wider Donbass region. So it surrenders a bit of that to Putin. Some would say that's capitulation, surrender, appeasement, whatever. That's fine. Let's set those arguments to one side just for a second. But surely the point is, Trump says, here's the deal. I've negotiated this deal. Putin says yes. I say yes. Zelensky says no, and Europe says no. Well, I've tried. I've done my best. I've brought the president of Russia to American soil, possibly on more than one occasion. He's done one already. There may well be more. I've brought everybody together. I've tried to make peace. You've said no. Do you know what? Off you go and you pay for
it. And the disputes that led to this are where Western Europe and Ukraine, the leadership under Zelensky, are refusing to move 1 inch. You talk about not 1 inch of Ukrainian soil.
Do you think that's true,
Russia,
though? Do you think that behind the scenes, surely they must realise if they engage in this process, it's not going to be exactly what they want at the end of it?
I think, unfortunately, what they're still saying publicly is that NATO will expand. Okay, we won't do it right now. And the same fears that they expressed, that they have to have security guarantees because Putin will come back and reignite a war later. I think Putin's concern has to be, well, they're still saying we're going to expand NATO. If not this week, it may be next year, it may be the year after. So if you don't have something concrete to end this, then you're just delaying the inevitable, which will be more conflict over this territory. And I would just point out, Peter, that I don't think this is, at least from President Trump's standpoint, all about these minerals and the agriculture and industrial power in the eastern Ukrainian port. I think it's that the people there identify as Russian. They are Russians. They speak Russian. And for a decade, since the U.S. engaged in the coup in Ukraine. These people in Donetsk, Mariupol, and the Donbass have been under attack from Kiev, have been being, fired upon, and you've had missiles and launches, and there have been civilian casualties there for a decade. They don't want to go back to being under the Kiev regime's thumb, and I think that again is you have to deal with the reality not only on the battlefield but the people you're dealing with. The same way I think you have to recognize that the only people saying that Putin really wants to take all of Ukraine, he wants to roll into Kiev, are the ones who are trying to keep the war going. Those people in Kiev and Western Ukraine do not identify as Russian. They don't want to be in Russia. You don't want to take territory and people that you then cannot really control because they have no allegiance to you, because you're going to have to deal with guerrilla warfare and terrorism and everything else like that. The other real inconsistency, Peter, is we keep being told, and these Western leaders say it all the time, if we don't stop Putin in Kharkov, he'll be in Berlin and Paris and London.
I just think that's nonsense. I think that's always been nonsense because in 3.5 years he's taken a fifth of Ukrainian territory. If he is not in a London is not going to fall. Putin is not going to put Russian jackboots in London. That is not going to happen.
And yet, on one hand, they argue they can't proceed into Pokrovsk. On the other, they're saying he's going to be in Berlin next week. Which is it? That's inconsistent. And I think taking two in particular, I think, by the way, Keir Starmer will end up going to this meeting as well. I think he wants to be part of the grand scheme and show that England is back and a part of a united Europe. But taking Ursula von der Leyen and Mark Rutte is two of the people that have said some of the most ridiculous things in this entire conflict. When President Trump was in Scotland and met with Ursula von der Leyen, that did not go well. By the way, I do think that you'll see Zelensky wearing a suit for this meeting. I think the White House issued an announcement, wear a suit, dude, this time. And then Mark Rutte, in one of the most ridiculous statements of a world leader, perhaps in world leader history, said just a few months ago, Ukraine is winning on the battlefield. The front line is just moving in the wrong direction.
Brilliant.
There is not even a recognition among these Western European leaders that this war is lost, and the time to stop the carnage is now.
Well, that's up there with Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader in 2019, who argued that even though he'd lost the election, he'd won the argument. I mean, it's patently absurd. Just from an American domestic perspective, how engaged are people in America with this? How much do they want this to be solved? How big a political issue is it in Washington, Steve?
I think the fatigue of the dollars and the money that's been going to Ukraine is at a high point. You've got members of Congress now that are starting to vocally demand, okay, where's the accountability? Where is the money gone? Where has the munitions, many of the weapons that have been sent there are turning up around the world as well. I don't think this is as high on the list in terms of primary concerns as still inflation, the price of groceries, crime in our streets, crime in Washington, D.C. I think this is way down the list. And I think that's the other reason President Trump is prepared to tell these Western European leaders and Zelensky, I brought peace to the table, either sign it or y'all handle it yourselves.
Steve, thank you for that analysis. Steve Gill, former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Very, very interesting to talk to you. Joanna in Salisbury's been in touch and says, hi, Cardi P. All the bigwigs in the EU at the meeting there to make sure they keep their fossil fuel supplies and to divvy it up to make sure that Zelensky signs away Ukraine. All those that were wringing their hands and had to be dragged kicking and screaming when Ukraine needed them. They funded Russia by keeping the fossil fuels flowing. Hypocrites, the lot of them, says Joanna. Neil in Salisbury says, afternoon, Peter. Starmer won't know whether to stick or twist. Catherine says, I'm not sure Ukraine has any say in those conversations as I compare the warmth and respect visible during Trump and Putin meeting to the lack of it in the Trump and Zelensky meeting. Let's hear from Tarquin in London. Tarquin, you got some thoughts on this?
Yeah, Peter, I think what we're seeing here, the optics of the whole gaggle of globalist goons suddenly arriving on the West Wing is going to make Bush, first of all, it would make me feel intimidated if all these communists arrived in my backyard.
Not all communists, are they?
I don't know. If you digress me, I'll never get to my point.
Go ahead, Tarquin.
The thing is,
this is just absolute optical nut job. And of course Starmer will be there, because Steve, the commenter, just quite rightly said, Zelensky will be saying, here, I need a new suit. Don't worry, I'm going to my friend Mr. Ali. He'll have you fix them in a truck.
Okay, Tarquin, let's keep the I love your impressions, but let's keep it to the serious points.
I think the serious point is this. If you're an American exchequer, you know, the Americans, and all but say the British government, and you sent billions upon it, and there's no audit trail, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, well, listen, I think a lot of people will make that point as well. Tarquin was singing the other day. Chris, my producer's looking at me thinking, what on earth just happened there? Tarquin was singing the other day. I had to stop him singing when you weren't here, Chris. Gary in Liverpool says, I think Putin going to America showed a lot of trust, and when he asked Trump maybe next time they could meet in Russia, Trump didn't seem too keen, says Gary in Liverpool. I think that would be really interesting if he did that. Good morning, Peter, says Paul Kitty from the London School of Fantasy Economics. Oh dear, what sort of school is this regarding Paul down in Devon, outside your London bubble? Phil in Portsmouth says, why don't prisons have guard towers on the corner with the pure intention of making prisons a no-fly zone and shoot the drones down? There's no way on earth they should be allowed to make deliveries, says Phil in Portsmouth. It feels a bit like all the other leaders may or are about to gang up on Trump, and I hope he doesn't but feel he just might walk away saying, I tried. Cheers, Peter. Cheers, says Peter in West Yorkshire. Quite a few other remarks on all sorts of topics. Gary says, when you have tried every which way, you can do the wrong thing, but eventually you're left with no choice but to do the right thing. You shouldn't then be praised for doing the right thing. The only reason Starmer is holding a national inquiry into the grooming gangs is because he was eventually left with no other choice. It's disappointing you try to give him credit for that. Gary, I wasn't strictly speaking giving him credit. I think I was saying, in fairness, he has now done this. The person I was talking to, I think he sent in a message, said he hasn't moved on this at all. He has. Like, I'm not saying good for him. It took him a very, very long time to do so. What I'm saying is that factually he has moved, and factually there is a national inquiry, when the person who sent in the message was implying that there was not. So I'm not praising Starmer. I'm saying let's deal in facts. Margaret in Birmingham says, some people out there want Trump to fail. I think President Trump will get a peace deal. He wants to put an end to the war. Give the strong leader some credit, says Margaret. Michelle says, perhaps removing the cap, the two-child benefit cap, might be a small incentive for British families to have kids instead of letting this invasion continue. Jane says, there's a lot of poverty in Wales. Perhaps he could mention this to colleagues in Labour-run Wales, why they have wasted money on pet projects rather than the basics, which are the worst in the UK. Don in Chelmsford says, if we are to ever reform prison, we need to invest in the prison estate. We need tough regimes, well-paid prison staff. We need to stop drug use, but I fear the authorities currently turn a blind eye to keep inmates quiet, says Dawn in Chelmsford. Plenty more to discuss. We'll take more of your calls, texts, voice notes, WhatsApp messages, all coming up in just a minute here on Talk. Stay with us.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse, but it's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody who has been in touch, including Carl on voice notes, who has some thoughts on the childcare benefit cap. This is what Carl has to say.
Hi there, Carl in Birmingham. The childcare benefit cap needs to stay in place, but with one caveat, that for every child you have over 2, so when you get your 3rd child, 4th child, 5th child, you pay less tax on your PAYE. So that way you're making working reduce your costs for your kids. That way you can have more kids if you're working. If you're not working, 2 children and that's it, because you can't afford anymore. Job done.
Thank you for that, Carl. Sylvia's been in touch on Rayner and Farage. Loads of people getting in touch about Angela Rayner, the different allegations she has made about Nigel Farage. Let me actually just remind you of what they are, if I can find the piece of paper in front of me. This is my desk is a mess here because there's so many different articles. Rayner accuses Farage of fueling revenge porn culture. She's claimed Farage would open the floodgates to revenge porn and fail a generation of young women by scrapping online safety laws. This is what Sylvia has to say on that.
Good morning, Peter. I would just like to say something about Rayner and her comment about Nigel Farage. If I was him, I would sue her. She is saying something about his character that is plainly not true. All they are frightened of is losing their votes and her constituency. That's all that this is about. They just want to hammer him and hammer him and hammer him. Well, Miss Rayner, it ain't going to work.
Thank you very much for that, Sylvia. Another one on this exact topic from Rob.
Hello, Peter. It's Rob in sunny Stalbridge, just south of racist Birmingham City Council. Pete, regarding Angela No-Brainer Rayner and the Labour Party attacking Farage, we know it's going to come. I'm just waiting for the criminal charges I'm going to try and bring against Farage to try and stop him running in the next election, because that's the playbook they used in America against Trump, which failed. They tried it in Europe, in France, and they kind of succeeded with Le Pen. Right, so we know what's coming, but let's get one thing straight, and I'll tell this Labour Party now, we're not stupid, right? We see through you. We see through your lies. You're scum. As your deputy leader said, you're scum. Or shall we call you scumbags, because you thief off the British people and give to the legal immigrants. Cheers, mate.
Rob, thanks for that. Strong views there, definitely. I'm very happy to call people who are shoplifters scumbags. I personally probably wouldn't do it for our political leaders. But listen, Rob, we're the home of free speech. You're entitled to your view. You're entitled to say what you want within the law. You've done exactly that, and thank you for your message. Quite a number of people getting in touch about prisons. This big story in the Sunday Times today about the prison chief who had links to gangsters. Vanessa Frake was on earlier, the former prison governor. She's written a book actually called The Governor, and she was giving me her view on this. Mary is in Hemel Hempstead and gave me a ring about this, 0344 499 1000. Mary, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, it's just I heard the interview, it was some weeks ago now, I think, about the business of trans women in the jails,
yes,
which is what a lot of people were up in arms about her against.
Yes.
What she said was that how if people had been living the lifestyle of a woman that had the surgery and been living this lifestyle for many, many years and had changed everything and had the certification, she couldn't see any problem with certain parts of the prison being, in a women's prison, being designated for them. But people have taken it out of context and said that she says anybody who says they're a woman can go into a women's prison, and that was wrong and it was not fair.
So do you think what she said was fair? Would you be happy for those people who've transitioned from being from they've had the surgery, they've a trans woman as they would be called, to be in prison?
Well, as she's pointed out, if they had a separate area, separate wing for them.
Why not just put them in a men's prison?
Well, if they've had everything done, and in a way, they're in a halfway house, aren't they? They're neither one or the other. As far as I'm concerned, a man can't be a woman, and it's as simple as that, and a woman can't be a man. But the thing is, they're in a halfway house. These people have had all the surgery and everything, so God knows what would happen to them in a male prison. Can you see my point?
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, I don't want to misinterpret or misunderstand your argument, Mary, but someone like Isla Bryson, or the person who called themselves Isla Bryson, who was a man who hadn't had any of the surgery, was calling himself a woman, was a rapist in a women's prison, huge outcry about that in Scotland. But your position, and I don't want to get this wrong, Mary, and tell me if I'm wrong, your position would be if someone who was a criminal was in a women's prison and had been living as a woman for years, had all the surgery, you'd be sort of happy enough if they were in a separate area?
Oh yeah, I can't see the problem there. But somebody like Isla Bryson, I mean, was no more a woman than the man in the moon. I mean, that was ridiculous.
Certainly was, yeah. Mary, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that.
Another topic.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Just about the corruption, like in the police force. There seems to me nowadays corruption everywhere in the Parliament, in the the way we've been misled by Labour, the corruption in the Home Office. It just seems to be going right through everything.
Yeah, I just wonder who we can trust anymore. That is a really, really big point. It's a big, big point in our society. And just on the same issue, Dave's been in touch from London. Dave, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi Peter, great show. I can keep it quite short.
Take your time, Dave. There's no, I'm not rushing you.
No, that's okay. Well, basically, I would have just been phoning up to make the exact same points that Mary just made, and I appreciate you had to ask Vanessa the thing about the trans stuff, and I thought she answered it very well. But I called because you had a voicemail of the black and white issue. Someone going, well, if she can't know the difference between a man and a woman, I don't believe a word that comes out of a man.
Yeah, that was the message that came in. Yeah,
I would, I can believe a lot of the words that come out of her mouth, because for me, she's talking how she feels. And as Mary said, your Isla Bryson issue is irrelevant. He's got full stack penis, all that kind of stuff. Man's prison. Thank you very much. Good night. But certainly, as I think she also said in that interview, there are some pretty nasty women as well in prison.
Certainly, yeah.
They're not all Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
So I suspect that some women in prison might think, I feel safer with that person that's lived that life, done all the surgery and all that kind of stuff being near her and around me than, say, Pat the Knife from Barnet, So, I think that it is a bit of a common sense thing. And I think, so I know they'll go after her now and they'll try and use this as a wedge to get at her and reform and reform want men in women's prisons. But I'm not buying that, and I listened to her interview properly, and when she made the statement when she was with Farage, and I think good on her. She's got my vote, so if she's listening, don't worry about all the people going, I can't believe a word coming out of her mouth type stuff, because I don't think, and as Mary just demonstrated, that's not how a lot of us think.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts there, Dave, much appreciated. Let's hear another voice note from James. This is on the Online Safety Act.
Hi, Peter. This Online Safety Act is not fit for purpose. We all know it. They're restricting posts what they shouldn't restrict. And Angela Rayner saying they open the floodgates for revenge porn is just absolutely ridiculous. What she's saying that 85% white males in this country can't be trusted, basically. Yeah, but that's all right for Sharia courts. Yeah, it's all right for undocumented males being put up in hotels and let out to harass our women. No, that's all right. That's not a problem. When's this government going to get its finger on the pulse of this country?
Listen, James, thank you for that. We've got some breaking news, and that is, this will not shock you. Sir Keir Starmer will be accompanying the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to Washington tomorrow for that meeting with Donald Trump. Starmer is going. He's one of several other European leaders expected to join, including France's President Macron, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and the European Commission President and Chelsea Hawks lookalike Ursula von der Leyen. It comes as the US President reportedly extended an invitation to all of them. Starmer set to attend the Coalition of the Willing conference call shortly. That will happen very shortly. If we get any kind of readout, any kind of press release between now and 1 o'clock, we will bring that to you. The coalition he chairs alongside Macron and Merz, the French and German leaders respectively there, has the aim of bringing countries together to protect a peace deal in Ukraine. So that is the confirmation that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, and the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, the President of France Emmanuel Macron, the President of Finland Alexander Stubb, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and the European Commission President, the one and only Ursula von der Leyen, will accompany Volodymyr Zelensky to Russia. Not to Russia, to Washington. Tomorrow they're going to the White House. So they're talking to Donald Trump about that, about peace in Ukraine. Lots to discuss in all of that. We'll also, in just a second, be discussing a really disturbing story. This is more pro-Palestinian protesters shouting at a demonstration at RAF High Wycombe. We're also asking the question whether the people are engaging their critical faculties. Really interesting video I want to show you as well. And Jonathan Sacerdoti, the journalist and broadcaster, is going to react to it. So stay with us and get your call in, get your comment in. Loads of those coming through, and we'll get as many people on the air as we can between now and 1 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now to Jonathan Sacerdoti, the journalist and broadcaster, about quite a number of quite concerning things. One of them is the chants of shame on you have been yelled by pro-Palestinian supporters during a demonstration at RAF High Wycombe. We know Palestine Action targeted planes causing millions of pounds worth of damage. There are charges in those cases, so we'll be careful. But that happened at RAF Bryce Norton. They filmed it themselves. They put it on air. They put it on social media. But now pro-Palestinian protesters have chanted RAF shame on you as they held a demonstration outside an air base calling for an embargo on selling arms to Israel. This is hundreds of demonstrators gathering along the barbed wire fence of RAF High Wycombe yesterday afternoon at the protest organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Those are the people who arranged the marches in London. Some would say, Jonathan, this is safe and legal protest, that these people are exercising their free speech. Do you agree with that? What do you think?
It might be legal, but certainly a bit tragic to watch these people jeering at RAF bases, or sometimes we've seen similar protests attacking them. And I think really the protest class is just showing themselves up. They want to get out and about whenever they can, of a weekend or during the week even. Some of them appear not to be encumbered by employment and jobs to stop them doing that. And I think their interest is just in creating trouble, protesting about pretty much anything. I think most ordinary people watching this, it doesn't change their minds, it doesn't persuade them, it doesn't convince them on whatever issue it is that protest class decides to go and make a nuisance of itself over, whether it's Just Stop Oil or the Free Palestine mob or Palestine Action or really any of them. I think if you've got a strong argument to make because of your strong beliefs, make it in an educated and informed way, have an interesting debate, don't go and jeer at the RAF, for goodness sake. This is just, I think, giving away what the real motivation of a lot of these people is, which is just to undermine the way things are in Britain.
What do you make of the fact that over 500 people were arrested for supporting Palestine Action last weekend? We know there are charges against more than 60 of them. Was the Metropolitan Police right to arrest all those people, especially as some of them were probably never going to be charged?
Well, there's a situation now where Palestine Action has been prescribed as a terrorist organisation, and that means that if you go out and express your open support in public for that organisation, you are breaking the law. That's my understanding of how this works. Just the same as if you went out and declared on a placard your support for Al-Qaeda or for Hamas. So I think the fact that those people, after it was prescribed, decided to go out and do exactly that shows that that was their intention. I don't think any of them didn't know that it had been prescribed as a terrorist organisation. And truthfully, if they were really interested in showing support for Palestinian Arabs in the Gaza Strip, for example, there are so many other ways they could have done that that wouldn't have deliberately fallen foul of that law. That
they could have also just deleted the word action on their placards and stayed within the law. They would have been protesting lawfully had they deleted the word action. And I love all this. I mean, I had one of our, someone contacted me and just said, oh, what about these you know, a grandmother who's been arrested? What harm is a pensioner doing? Well, Bernie Madoff was 70 when he did the Ponzi scheme.
Well, and more than that, you know, I don't think it really, it's really game playing. And I think that's the problem. You know, what harm does a grandmother do?
Well, they want those pictures. They want those pictures of the 89-year-old being lifted by the police. That's what they want for propaganda purposes.
But anyway, we've seen people arrested, grandmothers or mothers, carers, people stuck at home looking after children or family members who are unwell. We've seen those people arrested and put in jail for a tweet, for example. So I don't think that the same people who are saying, what about these grandmothers going out and protesting in this instance, were saying the same when it was Lucy Connolly, for example. And instead, this time, these are people who've deliberately and knowingly gone out and expressed support for a prescribed terrorist group. That's actually the reason they wrote those words on those placards. That wasn't the reason that people like those who were involved in the protests after the Southport killings, that's not why they did it. They weren't going out and trying, as far as I can tell, broadly speaking, to break the law. They weren't trying to show support for a group they knew was prescribed as a terrorist organisation. So I do think there's a bit of a double standard going here, absolutely. And that's why I call them the protest class, because these people really, I think, are just more interested in feeling virtuous. They go out and they think they've done a great thing of the weekend. They've gone out on a sunny day and shown their support for whatever the topic that all their friends are supporting is. I don't think this has got anything to do with the welfare or well-being of Palestinian Arabs at all. And they know it. We all know it. These people are just trying to inconvenience our lives. And meanwhile, there is a very serious situation going on in the Levant. There is a very serious situation going on with Hamas still ruling over many of those people's lives, still holding them hostage, and the people they stole on October the 7th from Israel hostage. There is still a war going on, and all the horrors that are associated with that. These people's vanity doesn't make any difference in relation to that. It just makes them feel special because they managed to get themselves arrested for doing something they thought was a bit edgy.
I want to play you a video that was sent to me by a listener this week, and you know, people send me stuff all the time. It's great. They email me, they send me stuff on Twitter. Always love to hear from viewers and listeners of this program. And I just saw this video. I watched it. It's someone on TikTok. I don't know his name, but I expect his name is not Wild Ninja 8, but that's perhaps not how he was christened. But it was just a really, really interesting video that brought a lot of the kind of conversations we often have, Jonathan, together. And I just want to play this video for the viewers and listeners who are watching and listening at the moment, and then get Jonathan's reaction. Let's just play this video on TikTok from Wild Ninja 8.
Palestine is not a movement. It's a new religion, and the liberal West has converted en masse without even realizing it. It's not about land or liberation. It's a belief system built on a lie. It has its prophets, the influencers, washed-up actors, and failed academics delivering truth as revelation. It has its martyrs, or the children of Gaza, used as human shields, sacrificed by their own leaders. Its high priests, the corrupt UN and NGOs who dictate morality and who the world must love or hate. And of course, it has its devil, me, the Zionist, cast as evil incarnate for believing Jews have the right to exist and govern themselves in their ancestral homeland, Israel. To question the doctrine is heresy. To ask about its billionaire leaders is blasphemy. To mourn Israeli lives is apostasy. They wear keffiyehs like crosses, chant slogans like prayer, and repost rage bait like scripture. Gaza has become their holy land, but the place where they worship is right here, online. The facts don't matter. The evidence doesn't matter. What matters is being part of the congregation, the global cult of the righteous. Outrage brings belonging. Protests offer salvation. Shame Israel and donate funds, and you are cleansed of Western guilt and reborn as righteous. You're either a believer or a monster. There is nothing else. But where does the money go? Are Gazans withdrawing cash from ATMs in tents? If they're starving and there's nothing to buy, why send money? And if there is food, who is selling it to them? Who is profiting? Hamas and their Islamist backers in Qatar and Iran. They could end the war they started today. But why would they? The more it looks like they lose, the more they win. And they have you doing their PR for free. By engineering campaigns of mass starvation, genocide, and colonization, they can starve their victims, commit genocide, and continue to colonize the region while raking in billions from sham charities, enough to fund their jets, yachts, and penthouses. And it works. They know us better than we know ourselves, and like all cults, they prey on the lost, confused, and outcast, promising a future of utopia while delivering nothing but destruction.
So apparently that guy's name is Zach Ross. That video, which was sent to me by a viewer, I have just retweeted on my Twitter, @PeterCardwell, if you want to watch it again and you want to share it. Jonathan, I think there are some very strong and perfectly well-founded and well-expressed views in that. What do you think?
One hears a lot of stuff on TikTok and Instagram and X that maybe isn't necessarily based on facts and truths, but I do have to say bravo to him, because that's a really tight explanation, I think, of a phenomenon that is really worrying today. And I'll also add that it's not just this issue. I think that kind of religious fervour is also at the root of some of the other causes that we've seen provoke similar responses from large groups of people. So I'll go back to Saint Greta. You know, this idea that this kind of child icon of the impending doom of apocalypse created by the climate really seized so many people, especially in a younger generation. And that mass hysteria has often expressed itself in huge crowds and protests, disruptions, eventually acts even occasionally of terrorism or criminal, at least, damage. And I think the same is true here, but this time, you know, it's not about the environment or the climate. It's about Israel, the Jewish state. It's about its right to protect itself against a genocidal Islamist enemy that did try to carry out a genocide, that did attack on October the 7th. So I think that, again, it is very worthwhile. Hopefully, if it's in that medium, going around the world on TikTok, there will be some open-minded people who will hear that and who will actually open their minds a bit. They'll change their minds. I think that's always the problem. For people who are seized by that kind of religious fervour, for that sort of almost religious movement feature of these kind of causes, I think they're often not open to hearing arguments or debate or reason, and hopefully that sort of video will help them break through a bit and just try to do a bit more research for themselves, because this is actually an extremely complex geopolitical situation. One I find fascinating. I mean, it is the focus of most of my work at the moment. So I'm not suggesting people shouldn't be interested in it, but I am suggesting that people should look at evidence and facts and try and listen to people like him and see if it makes them think a bit.
Critical thinking. Who'd have thought? Jonathan, thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Sacerdoti, they're a broadcaster and journalist. Interestingly, the White House, will you hear this? The White House has informed the Ukrainian delegation that Zelensky must wear a suit or there will be no meeting tomorrow. This is my favourite detail of anything that has happened in the last 48 hours in regard to Ukraine. The White House has informed the Ukrainian delegation that Zelensky must wear a suit or there will be no meeting. I hate ties and I don't often wear suits. I have a few suits and I don't mind wearing a suit, but I hate wearing a tie. I wear ties for 4 reasons, which are, let me see, job interviews, court appearances, meeting royalty, and there's one other one, funerals and weddings and things like that. Yes. Is Starmer getting his new suit dry cleaned? Is Lord Ali helping with that? We don't know. Anyway, what do you think of the fact that the White House has informed the Ukrainian delegation that Zelensky must wear a suit or there will be no meeting? 0344 499 1000. More of your calls, text, voice notes and indeed messages in just a second. Stay with us.
We're not actually in recession, not a major one. We're not going forward. Nothing's getting better. Nothing's getting sort of drastically worse. It's just slowly worse. That's what's sort of very painful about all of this. There's all sorts of potential for Britain to be a major military power or a major diplomatic power if it wants to be. As much as anything else, it just seems to be that our political class has decided to stand still and wring its hands. And that's ultimately what is so frustrating. We're not yet in free fall. It could be averted, the crisis that's coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Stephen Millings in Belfast says, why do folk get so hung up on Zelensky wearing a suit? He pledged to wear military fatigues until the day the Russians withdrew from his country, says Stephen. Dorothy says, good afternoon, Peter. Thank you for showing the TikTok video from Zach Ross. Hopefully people will listen. Great show today, says Dorothy. I'll be brutally honest with you, Dorothy. When we looked at the papers, we saw all the news that was going around. We were having our chat before the programme and putting all the programme together. We kind of thought, is there much around today? Turns out there is, and there's loads of people who want to react to it. I'm going to just play some voice notes in a second, but just a reminder that the White House has informed the Ukrainian delegation that Zelensky must wear a suit, otherwise there will be no meeting. Peter says, what will Starmer bring to Washington this time? Possibly an invitation to Windsor Safari Park. I'm sure Trump will love that. I'm beginning to think that Starmer jumps at any opportunity to see Zelensky. Those embraces are becoming more unusual. Steve in Birmingham says, does the White House stipulate what kind of suit Zelensky should wear? He should go dressed in a wetsuit to demonstrate what a joke all of this posturing is, says Steve in Birmingham. If he turns up in a wetsuit, I feel a bit like sort of Les Dennis and Family Fortunes here. I'll give you the money myself. As long as he doesn't turn up in his birthday suit. Right, let's hear a voice note from Mark.
Hiya Peter, Mark Manchester. All these European leaders want to get over in Washington to be in with the talks. Most of them only going to see when they can start buying oil and gas again off Russia. If nothing will change, they'll all buy it as soon as they can. They'll all be back on the gas and the oil from Russia. Simple as that.
Thanks for your thoughts, Mark. Kelvin?
Hi, Peter. What a surprise. Starmer's off on a jolly, holding hands with Zelensky. You know, that's all it is, a jolly. Look at me, I'm the big statesman from England. You know, I'm the big I am, really. What a flipping prat. Anyway, that's my thoughts on him anyway. He can't run a bloody bath, never mind this country or any other country. Why is he poking his nose in other countries? He needs to sort this one out, the bloody idiot. Anyway, bye.
Calvin, thanks for your thoughts there. That's a view, I think, echoed by Jason in the Lake District, who says, so never hear Keir jets off again while our country continues to go down the toilet. Let's hear the views of Paul in the Cotswolds. Paul, you're very welcome to the programme. Paul's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What do you think, Paul?
Hello, Peter. You're obviously the voice of reason.
Thank you. Very kind.
Yes. So on the Ukraine, Zelensky, Trump, Putin affair, a few points really. I think it's been absolutely immoral that the European Union has been taking money hand over fist from the United States forever to support wars that have gone on our continent, where we've got enough money of our own to do the same as the Americans have done. So Trump is, well in his rights to actually call that out and do something about it. So well done for that. It focuses, our European leaders on the actual problems in Europe. The other thing is, if Trump is going to take minerals from Ukraine, the sooner he does that, the better, because if there are American personnel and commerce in Ukraine near the front line, it totally changes the dynamic of Mr. Putin lobbing rockets over and so on and so forth. And the third point, right, which I've heard nobody talk about at all, and it's very, very obscure. But why doesn't anybody invite Mr. Putin to join NATO? And then he has no fears of anything because he's part of the club. Then he will get the commerce from Europe that he wants.
He'll never do that, though, would he, Paul? He would never join NATO, surely. That's the bogeyman for him.
If we're talking about stopping a war and stopping millions of people dying, why not? Everything should be on the table.
Okay. I mean, really interesting thoughts there, Paul. Thank you for those. And Jane's been in touch as well. He says, can't wait to see the photograph of all those Europeans with Donald Trump. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs come to mind for some reason. Snow Orange, perhaps. Andy says, from Nottingham, says, I wonder if all these European leaders that are travelling to Washington will share a plane. They always shout about climate change, but will happily take 10 or 12 planes instead of one, says Andy in Nottingham. Yeah, they should sort of fly up and, you know, wheels up in Brussels, maybe nip down to Paris, pick up Macron, over to London, pick up Starmer, and then go over together. That would make sense. Peter says, it was very refreshing to hear your American commentator speak with such truth. A rare occurrence. That's Steve Gill, who we were talking to earlier. John in Newcastle says, why don't the two sides give the people in the eastern region a vote on whether they want to be part of Russia or part of Ukraine, and let them decide as they live there? Stephen says, why do... I've read that one out. James says, Starmer will bring going to Washington because he needs the air miles when he goes on holiday. Sean says Starmer will of course go. He'd attend the opening of an envelope if it gets him out of the UK. John says Putin sees all the EU countries as unfriendly, so I don't think Putin will be influenced by any of them. All the Russian-speaking parts of Ukraine already belong to Russia. And actually on the two-child benefit cap, which is something a lot of people have been in touch about today, Alan says, I don't agree with your recent guest. Parents must be willing to do without luxuries and even food if they want more than 2 children so that they can feed the kids they've brought into this world without depending on the state. Many people in this country feel that the state will feed their kids. That's not fair to folks who live within their means. Mark in Hull has some thoughts on the two-child benefit cap. Mark, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter. Thank you ever so much for having me on. Got to say, enjoy the show. Great. And I really enjoyed your book. It was a really good read.
There's another one coming out in September. You're more than welcome to give it a read too.
Thanks. It is just in relation to the two-child benefit cap. A lot of commentators have focused on, you know, the potential for parents to be either have a medical catastrophe or for circumstances to change. Yep. And we all get that. But if that's the case, then surely either unemployment benefits or disability benefits can look into the whole family circumstances and make any ad hoc payments through that.
And make an evaluation based on the circumstance. I agree with
Correct.
you. We can't just have a one size fits all, because it doesn't fit all. That's the point.
Exactly, and a universal benefit. I mean, you know, stockbrokers, but there are other professions, earning £200,000 a year. What on earth is another 10 or 15 quid a week, going to influence them one way or the other? And that's the problem with the universal benefit. So I would have a tweak to the rules. And my very quick second point is, why the delay in number 10 saying whether our Prime Minister was going off to this? Was it because he was working out whether he could take his free tickets to the Manchester United-Arsenal game today and he didn't want to miss out? Just a thought.
Very interesting thought there, Mark. Thank you for it. Great.
God bless you, Peter. Have a really good day.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great opinions there. Great taste in books as well. Thank you to Lady Anne, who says EU leaders running to daddy tomorrow. It's pathetic. They're pathetic. Rafi says people mock Trump for his simple language, but simplicity isn't stupidity. It's clarity. He gets things done. He moves the needle. Meanwhile, the British cling to their flowery words in elite universities, and where has that led to? A nation face down in the gutter begging for relevance. Don't be fooled by polished accents and academic jargon. Results speak louder than rhetoric. Graham says on Twitter, it's bizarre that we keep being told Zelensky is the leader of a sovereign independent country, but when it comes to negotiating peace with Russia, he has to be accompanied to the White House by the leaders of various European states to ensure he does the right thing. Leslie says, I will be voting reform, but didn't Nigel say he wants to get rid of the two-child benefit cap? He did. That is Reform Party policy. In my opinion, a big mistake, which I hope Reform will backtrack on, says Leslie. I want to hear one more voice note. This is from Mark about the leaders on Putin. This is what Mark says on voice notes.
And now from the BBC, a special programme commissioned by the Prime Minister. Or do you think you are kidding, Mr. Putin, if you think old England's done? We created the coalition of the willing, don't you see? Would you mind turn the gas on, please, please, please?
Mark, a future in comedy awaits. My goodness, Keith in the Philippines says Trump should deny entry to Starmer. Just tell him he is unwelcome in a democracy. Chris says, I agree with you, admire Trump. He's the only leader who's actually got a meeting with Putin to discuss the war in any real depth. In fairness to Macron, has also seen Putin previously. Neil says the poorest families will be getting universal credit already, so this extra money would mostly be cancelled out anyway. The only people to benefit would be predominantly sections of society that tend to have larger families. Frank says, Peter, would you kindly tell me what's the demographic of the family who want 3 kids, that is? P.S. My mother's an Irish immigrant who came to England with 3 kids and got given absolutely nothing and worked until she was 75. Betty says, absolutely, you don't have kids if you can't afford them. Help should be reserved for those where family breaks down. It's a lifestyle choice. I have one we couldn't afford more and never got a penny from the state for any of them. Another person says, John in Westminster, who says, of course Rayner and the whole of the Labour government think we're stupid. If they didn't, they wouldn't continually knowingly lie to us. Oh, wait a minute, it may be that they're the stupid ones and don't realise that we know they're lying. Great show, says John, who says he's fed up. On being fed up, Sharon feels fed up as well. She sent a voice note in. This is what Sharon has to say on her voice note.
Hi, Peter. I am really disgusted with this government. It's everything from the rape gangs, the pensioners, the farmers, targeting the disabled whilst throwing away taxpayer money, handing it to Mauritius and the terrorists of UNRWA and Iran, and to continuously want to fund the migrant crisis, not to mention their behaviour towards Israel and recognising a Palestinian state. Also the sleaze with Lord Ali, the lying and the gaslighting and misleading Parliament, etc., etc., etc. I shudder to think what's coming next. All the protests from around the country should be brought to the capital to descend upon Whitehall to call for this Prime Minister's resignation and a general election. This should be unrelenting and continue week after week to bring this issue directly in front of Starmer so he can see the level of anger for himself. This should continue until he resigns.
Thank you, Sharon. Derek says, Peter, you want to deal with Trump? You want a deal. Trump wants a deal. I will give you a deal. Russia keeps the territory it has captured. Russia gives Ukraine 5 years of free oil and gas. Personally, I would not do a deal with Putin, says Derek. Herbie, you have the last word today. Herbie is in Harrow. Just about a minute left. Herbie, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter. Well, I'd like to say that Putin's got far more brains and far more intelligence than Trump and Starmer put together. He really knows how to play the game. You know, he's got him round his little finger, Trump. And as I say, as for Starmer, he hasn't got a bloody clue anyway, so what difference does it make?
Is it going to make any difference that Starmer's in Washington tomorrow?
No, not at all. You know, Trump's got him round his little fingers. Well, look how he stood last time when he was signing that paper. He dropped the papers and everything else. He's like a little boy, wasn't he? You know, waiting by the school teacher. You know, well, I've done something wrong. You know, he hasn't got a clue. He's not the statesman he thinks he is. I'm telling you that now. You can see it. Stands a mile off, and Putin can walk all over him.
Okay, well,
he's got far more intelligence.
Thank you very much, Herbie. That's Herbie in Harrow there. Thanks to everybody who has contributed today, all the guests and indeed the top team behind the glass as well. The producer has been Chris Jacobs, the assistant producer has been Kieran Galpin, the technical operator has been Dave Rhodes, Tech Up Dave of course, and vision mixers have been Titus D'Souza and Kalila Bradley. Porrick Birmingham has been the video editor, and the weekend editor has been Dean Spencer. Thanks also to Chris, who sent a lovely message saying, excellent show, Peter, great guest and well produced. I always look forward to spending late Sunday mornings with Cardi P. Chris, that is very, very kind of you. And the good news is you can do so next weekend as well. I'll be here on Saturday and Sunday from 10 o'clock. Also this week, Jeremy's back on Drive Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but I'm here on Thursday and Friday between 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock. There's an awful lot to discuss. Jeremy, of course, will be on Drive probably when that